Okay, so I think we're going to get everything started. So first, I would like to introduce our Dean, Dean Lanau. She has a few opening remarks.
Hello, everyone. So as Anne just mentioned, I'm Dean Lanau. I'm the Marianne D. Short Esquire Dean here at Boston College Law School, and it's such a pleasure to welcome all of you to this important symposium hosted by the BC LLM program. We're really thrilled to bring together a distinguished group of legal scholars, practitioners, and students for today's in-depth discussion on the evolving field of business immigration law. At Boston College, we really take pride in the work that our community does to engage with these critical issues. International connections are really a top priority at the school, and we're very, very excited to commit to fostering cross-border legal understanding and to addressing the needs of a globalized world. It really drives so much of the work that we're undertaking in our academic programs. This symposium really exemplifies our commitment to international legal discussions. Today's conversations, I hope, will provide valuable insights to the latest trends, practical challenges, and career opportunities at the intersection of immigration and business. I hope that they offer a chance to engage in thoughtful conversation on the legal complexities of business immigration, which are becoming ever more complex, as well as to explore practical solutions and also to reflect on how this intersects with broader business and policy concerns. I hope today's discussion is going to be enlightening and inspiring for all of you. Whether you're a student looking to deepen your understanding, a practitioner seeking to identify the latest trends, or a scholar interested in new avenues for research, I really encourage you to connect with your peers and engage with the exceptional speakers we have with us today. And on that, thank you so much for joining us. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to Anne and to Sergio also for helping to organize this, for my wonderful BC LLMs, for your support and inspiration in this. I'm really excited to launch a day of insightful dialogue with an exchange of ideas that will help to shape the future of business immigration law. So thank you again and welcome. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you very much. So now we will start getting into our first panel. Towards the end of the panel, we'll have some time for question and answer. And if you have a question, you can enter it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be able to answer that for you towards the end. So now I would like to pass it on to one of our LLM students, Shristi, who will be moderating our panel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Shrishti, and as you all know, I'm an LLM candidate at Boston College Law School. Prior to joining BC Law, I worked as an in-house legal counsel at a fintech company in India, where I dealt with corporate, technology, and contract law matters. And it's an absolute honor to be moderating this discussion today. As we all know, immigration law is constantly evolving with significant implications for business, employees, even students. So in this panel, we will explore the critical role of business immigration, the challenges companies and foreign workers face, compliance concerns, and I think it's a really hot topic now. So now let's start by introducing our esteemed panelists. I'd like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. We can begin with Mr. Adam and then Mr. Vincent.
Yeah, so thank you, Shristi. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Rosser. I'm a practicing business immigration lawyer. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I work at a full-service law firm. There are about 10 lawyers on our group who do business immigration. I've been there since 2001. Been in the field pretty good amount of time. Hopefully can survive some more. I'm a BC undergrad and moved on to law school at Georgetown, and do mostly work for large international companies, investors, U.S. companies hiring foreign workers, foreign students, and bringing other foreign workers, and enjoy what I do, although it's been challenging.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Vince Lau. I am an adjunct faculty member at BC Law School, teaching a course in business immigration. So check that out if you're interested. Also a BC alum. I graduated back in 1997, and I've been practicing immigration, business, employment, immigration, pretty much since then. I have a firm in downtown Boston, and we currently have 8 attorneys, and all we do is employment, immigration. I agree with Adam. It's a great space to be in. I really love what I do. If I wasn't practicing immigration, I probably would not be a lawyer. So I really enjoy that, and it looks like it's going to be an exciting few years ahead, Adam, and we're in this together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the introductions. So to set the stage, let's begin with the big picture. Business immigration plays a crucial role in the US economy. But for those who are unfamiliar with corporate immigration strategy, can you tell us why business immigration is essential to economic growth?
Vincent, go ahead.
Okay.
Started.
I think, it's called business immigration. I think some people call it business immigration, employment immigration, or corporate immigration. I don't want to oversimplify, but I think the world of immigration, I like to put them in 3 buckets. So Adam, you can comment on this as well. There's the employment or business bucket, there's the family bucket, and sort of like the court work, right? Immigration court work bucket. As far as the employment bucket is concerned, a lot of employers are trying to retain talent, keep talent here in America, or hire people from abroad, some of their managers, some existing talent that they have. And so the business immigration piece of it helps them in that, right? So I think in that sense, it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Immigration touches so many parts of our economy and our society. Jobs, we just have shortages in jobs in many fields, from healthcare, tech, STEM fields, and on and on. There are people that companies need to hire who they cannot, but they come to us when they can't find people to fill jobs generally. I'd add to under the employment space, a growing kind of area is enforcement and compliance. That's a big issue that's been coming up recently, making sure companies are filling out the right paperwork and keeping all their I-9 records when they hire people, and being prepared for worksite visits.
Yeah, and also that's a good point, Adam, right? I think a lot of times when people think about business immigration, they think of the high tech and life science space, but also as Adam pointed out, in healthcare. We represent a lot of mid-sized companies and also nonprofit organizations, also in the space of social work. So it's really just any profession. We're seeing the need that there is a shortage of US workers going into the different spaces. And so anytime anyone needs to be in the United States, they need permission from the government. And that's when Adam and myself, that's where we come in.
Okay, so now immigration laws and policy constantly change, especially now. And I think they're creating both challenges and opportunities. So if you had to summarize the single biggest challenge in business immigration today, what would it be?
Adam, you want to go first?
Okay. Well, I mean, the most immediate challenge right now is just the unpredictability of the new administration. We have been through, we expect a lot of the same things that we saw in the first Trump administration, but it seems like there's a little added force to things now. So the biggest challenge is really planning, being able to tell clients what to expect. Is it safe for me to travel? Is it, are we going to have enough time to do this? There's just so many unknowns. So we have to be very nuanced in how we advise clients, both the employers and the employees, about, what to expect, and is this going to work out? So there's a lot of unknowns and unpredictability. I think that's what it boils down to, is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I would also add the flip side to that is, while all the policies are changing and we're hearing a lot of noise, put noise in quotes, right, about what's going on, there are some fundamental laws and regulations. I mean, those are still the same, right? In that sense, it's, we sort of, I think Adam's role and my role is to calm down the client a little bit and to help them understand what's going on. I think for me, the other big challenge is processing times in general, like every single area, whether it's getting a visa at a consulate abroad, whether it's trying to work with the Department of Labor, or work with immigration service, I mean, everything is so slow, right? So I think while a lot of things seem to be changing and everyone's anxious and they want to get the results, things take longer and longer, right? It's almost as if we could get the result in a short amount of time, then maybe the anxiety level would go down. But when you tell people, well, you have to wait 2 to 3 years for something, they're like, well, I don't know what tomorrow brings. How can I plan for 2 to 3 years, right? So I would say that's another big challenge of processing times.
Yeah, and I think another point that comes to mind is just the laws don't really, it's frustrating for us. The laws that we have to work with are just have not been updated. They're antiquated. They don't reflect the needs of our economy, the reality of the modern world. So we're doing things. We have to go through processes that were designed decades ago, and in some cases that don't make sense anymore. For example, a typical green card sponsorship, we have to post ads in the Sunday papers still, and to show up for a labor market test. And that's just not how companies operate anymore.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Adam. So I actually work with the Department of Labor. When I meet with them, we point out, it's sort of like, hey, you're requiring us to post newspapers. In fact, we're finding more and more regions in the country no longer have Sunday papers. And the Department of Labor has acknowledged, they recognize it is a problem. They recognize this is not reality, but they said, we don't have the resources. We don't have the time to revisit this. Another piece of it, which I think the pandemic has forced them to rethink it, is digitization, right? The fact that, I have a paralegal sitting outside my office right now who's printing out over 1,000 pages of paper to put in a big FedEx box, right, to ship, because all the evidence and everything that needs to be filed is paper. Now, the irony is that once they accept it, they scan everything, right, and throw away the paper. And like, well, why couldn't you just take the digital version that I'm happy to send you? I mean, they're making progress very slowly, but again, it's 2025, right? And it could be faster.
Yeah, we're pretty much behind every other country, modern country in the world, in how they process immigration applications. Yeah.
So I think then this would be a follow-up question. Then another key issue is like visa backlogs. And because of the processes and procedures and like the wait time, many employers, they struggle to retain foreign talent due to these delays. So what may be the practical steps that businesses can take to navigate these challenges and support the foreign employees?
We're both really quiet here. Adam, did you have anything?
It's just long-term planning. And like Vince said, laws and regulations haven't really changed much, but the processing times have gotten really ridiculous, and we expect them to get even worse with layoffs and hiring freezes and so forth, and the government um, and not adopting new technologies and so forth. So it's really long-term planning. We are looking when we talk to a new client or we're talking about a case, we are looking, 4, 5, 6 years ahead in terms of how we're planning out everything in terms of and assuming that the employment continues and works out, we want to be able to make sure that this employee can continue without interruption working for this employer for as long as they both want to. And so it's long-term planning is really the best way to you have to look ahead, peek around corners, uh, try to spot any problems and challenges that are going to come up and how you're going to deal with it. So that's really where I think we kind of can really help clients instead of just here's a petition, get it done. Here you go. Here's the approval. Come back if you want more help. It's more of a long-term strategy that has to be done for every case, and every case is different.
Yeah, I would agree with Adam. It's really sitting down with the client and planning things out. I mean, I think the other piece also is that a lot of what we do is employer specific and job specific. And so there is that tension of how specific, into how deep, what a deep dive, what level of detail you want to have as far as the job description or job requirements. Is there room for some growth, some flexibility as the years go on? So I think on a very micro level, that's something that can be done. On a macro level, you know, on a macro level, obviously there's advocacy, right? That, you know, you can get employers involved in. We have found that a lot of employers are maybe not necessarily interested, right? Because they don't want to have their names in the newspapers, or they don't want to, but, you know, there are some baby steps that they can take in joining different chambers and different organizations to advocate for that. One of the things, you know, the Department of Labor had an opportunity, not as a criticism, but they had an opportunity to sort of revisit the green card process, right? The labor market test. And, you know, we were as an immigration bar, both Adam and I are members of this organization, was asking, hey, you know, instead of requiring an employer to test the labor market for every type of job, you know, we recognize that there are some occupations where there's a shortage, right? You know, can we just sort of bypass that? And there is a legal mechanism for that. It's just that that list of occupations, it's called the Schedule A, hasn't been revisited in decades, right? And so the Department of Labor was open to that, and a lot of different organizations were submitting suggestions as to adopting new ways of evaluating labor market shortages. So it's just sort of thinking creatively, catching up also with the process and doing what the rest of the world is doing. Hopefully that'll shrink some of the times. But I know that as an individual LLM job applicant, I mean, there's only so much you can do at that level, right? I want to be practical. I get it, right? So yeah.
So I think then my next question would be, and I think this is particularly relevant to some of our attendees today, and especially the LLMs. Many international students face long waits for H-1B sponsorships or green cards. So what alternative pathways or strategies should they be considering in that context then?
Well, I'll start. I mean, when I have a consultation with anyone, and I know that not all visa types work. There's a short-term visas, right? And then there's a long-term, getting a green card, you know, through family, through investment, or maybe, you know, prior to becoming an LLM, they had a past life, different career where they've got a lot of recognition. But I think, you know, I joke about this in my office. I'm one of the older guys in the office, and I can't remember everything, so I need, you know, mnemonics and devices. So I use something called the hello options, HELLO, right? You mentioned the H-1B, right? There's a lottery coming up for that, so they definitely should talk to their employer about that. There's the e-visa, right, where there is a little investment. We're not talking about multi-million dollars. You want to make sure there's a treaty with the government, you know, with their home government. The L visas are obviously for people who've worked abroad. So for students, maybe not so great, but, you know, think long term, right? Does it make sense for you to go home and work for a company for a year or two and then come back, right? And then there's the O visa, which is for individuals of extraordinary ability. And those are what we in our office call the wow visas. Like, is there something in your field that you're doing that you're getting some wow, getting some attention? So we usually run through those. Those are sort of very high level general visas. And then some countries will have their own visa types available too.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess as most students in that situation know, they do get 1 year of optional practical training when they graduate. Vince mentioned some other country-specific visas: Australia, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Singapore, the main ones that come to mind. If you're a citizen of any of those countries, then you have other options, special kind of H-1B type visas, and you know what a lot of students do, it always makes me a little uncomfortable, but a lot of students who run out of OPT time go on to something called curricular practical training. They go back to school and go on to curricular practical training. In my practice, I let them handle that themselves. If they choose to do it, choose the program that fits what they want to do. But it's basically a program where the curriculum is employment, so that they go to about a dozen schools or so that offer these programs, and allows them to work and be a student and get credit for the work that they're doing some type of classroom component to it. But and then keep trying for H-1Bs, because, as Vince said, the registration starting up again in a few weeks. I don't know, there's 30% chance of being selected in the registration each year. The fees are going up this year. Maybe it'll be a little better for, to dissuade some large organizations from putting in thousands and thousands where they don't have jobs for people yet and so on. But yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. There are a lot of people who are anxious about their future here because we just don't have enough good options, and there's too much of a talent drain. We see good, hardworking, smart people not stay in the U.S. Because the opportunities aren't so clear. And it's
And
unfortunate.
yeah, that's a really good point about the curricular practical training. And maybe just to give the students here some insight, why, Vince, why is it so bad? Adam, why are you guys dissuading it? It's what we in our industry call day one CPT, and curricular practical training is supposed to be, right? The idea behind it is that you're going to school, you're taking these courses, and your program says it'd be great if you had some hands-on or field practice. It's not really employment authorization, right? Or it's not supposed to be, an employment authorization for you to get a job on the side. So the concern the government has, and I think it's a legitimate concern, is that on the very first day, you haven't even gone to classes yet, right? And why are you why are you practicing what you just learned? So I will say, if, when we've had successful individuals who are on day one CPT who successfully move on, so I'd say one way to evaluate it is, can you really make the argument that, being in an office, being on the field, working really supplements your learning, right? And how much learning are you really doing? Oftentimes they'll look for in-person, at least being on campus for part of the time. So just make sure that it's a legitimate program. I mean, I think the flip side of it is, I'm sure Adam's heard this, we've heard this, that a lot of people get scammed, right? As students, right? They pay a lot of money, they're hoping, and I get it, it's tough, right? With our limited immigration options. So please be careful of those.
Yeah. Scanned by private companies and also entrapped basically by the government setting up fake schools.
Yeah.
So deal with reputable colleges and universities if you are looking at that option for sure.
So I think because of this reason, now we're also seeing global competition in the immigration space. Countries like Australia, UK, they have implemented policies that aim at attracting like top talent and even students then because of that reason. So in your view, is the US at a risk of losing its competitive edge? And if so, what could be done to maintain its leadership?
Yeah, I'll start absolutely. We're still busy. There's lots of business immigration, employment immigration happening. There's plenty of people still, wanting to come to America. It's perhaps the best place in the world to start a company, to do lots of things, despite all of these challenges that we're seeing. But other countries are getting more and more of the top talent in the global space for competition for the best talent, the best and the brightest. I think we are definitely seeing that. I've seen in my practice, people tell me, this is too difficult. I don't know. I can't, keep my family here. I can get a job back in India, get paid very good money, have good opportunities, and have a driver and a cook for them. Instead of working, morning to night. In America, not knowing if I'll be able to stay here another year or two. So this is a real thing that's happening, and I've definitely seen it.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I mean, I think I've been practicing for almost 30 years, and it still surprises me that no matter how hard or how long the wait times are, and Adam referenced Indian nationals, and Indian nationals have to wait 15 plus years to get their green card, which I'm surprised, right, that they want to stay around that long. But the desire to be in America is still very strong. I agree. I'm an American. I love my country. I'm really happy to be here. That said, yes, I mean, I think a lot of these other countries are making it quote unquote easier, right, to attract talent and to have people go there. So I do think that, not to get too political, but I think, yes, America needs to reevaluate some of our immigration laws and policies, as far as keeping talent. I mean, if they don't want to attract more talent, at least keep the ones who come, right? We've got some really excellent schools in not just in the Boston area, but throughout the country. And there are a lot of people coming for school. And honestly, if we could keep the people who come, we've trained them, right? And have them, keep the talent here, I think, yeah, that would be very helpful.
So because we were talking about India, and that reminds me of the tech sector, there's the next question. There are certain industries, maybe such as technology or healthcare, that feel the impact of immigration challenges more than the others? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, so a lot of individuals who are here in the professional space, regardless of field, are on the H-1B visa. I mean, we talk about the H-1B being a lottery. There's about 85,000 new H-1B visas given out every year. But once you're counted, then you don't have to go back to the lottery. So which is nice, right? So then these people can stay, find employers, but it is employer specific, right? So if you don't have that employment anymore, in the past, if you don't have that employment anymore, your visa status ends and then you have to go home. The government has allowed a 60-day grace period for some of these people. So we are seeing in the tech space, in the life science space, at least in the last year or so, there have been a lot of layoffs. I know that VC money in some of the life science spaces are drying up, or maybe they're a little less bullish about where they're investing. So a lot of these smaller or mid-sized companies are closing shop. So unfortunately, regardless of whether they're from India or not, that's a problem, right? And they've got to leave. I think the added issue with India is, in order for someone to get a green card, to get permanent residency, as much as there's a shortage of H-1B visas, there's also practically a shortage of immigrant green card visas, right? And individuals from each country cannot have more than a certain percentage. And India is a large country, China is a large country, and there's also a lot of people coming from those countries. So the wait times are really slow, right? So I mean, and I think just makes it more nervous for people.
Yeah, I agree with everything Vince said. Specifically, I think IT consulting companies are going to be facing a lot of challenges they have in the past. And, if the Trump administration picks up with where they left off, they might face some more challenges. Placing workers at third-party work sites, for example, and getting H-1Bs approved. A lot of times they can only get an approval for the contract period that they have, and so they have to file many petitions and so forth. I'd take another angle on this question, and maybe not what you're expecting, but I would say there are a lot of companies that are feeling the challenges kind of indirectly, like manufacturing companies. There are a lot of companies that cannot fill jobs. They're looking for workers to do hourly jobs, to do high-skilled and mid-skilled and low-skilled jobs. One of the reasons we have so many undocumented people in this country is because our economy demands it, but we don't have legal ways for them to be here to meet the needs of employers. That's one way that I think the manufacturing, other industries that have the need for a lot of employees to do hourly work are feeling the challenges very acutely by the failures of our immigration system.
Okay, so looking at the road ahead, and I know this might be a difficult question, but what changes, whether policy shifts or administrative reforms, do you anticipate in business immigration over the next 12 to 18 months?
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to take the easy one. We've been talking about the H-1B a lot, right? So part of the H-1B process, and actually a lot of the business immigration processes do require an employer to pay a certain wage. So during Trump's first administration, he had actually taken a stab at readjusting the wage levels. That surprised a lot of people, and it also increased the minimum salary, so to speak, and it was really hard for some employers to be able to comply with that. So that got challenged in court. And it was thrown out because he didn't follow, the rule. He didn't give notice as far as implementing this. So they're smarter now, right? Second time around. So we really do anticipate that they would look at that, and I anticipate that they're going to be challenging that. And in frankness, the Biden administration actually was going to look at that as well, but they ended up dropping it and not pursuing that piece. So both the Democrats and the Republicans really aren't psyched about the way the H-1B process is as it stands today. So I'm not surprised if, in the next year or so, at least on the business immigration side, Trump would sort of look at that and revisit that piece of it. So now, yeah, that was the easy one. I mean, Adam is the smarter guy on the call.
No, absolutely. On the H-1B, I mean, it's just so interesting. Again, not to get political, but it's just as an observer of all this and someone who has a stake in it, you have different factions within the Trump administration. Elon Musk is a great user of the H-1B program with his companies. And Stephen Miller, who's in the White House as an advisor, is very much on the opposite side. And so it will be interesting to see. And even Donald Trump himself said just last year that everyone who graduates from a U.S. school should be handed a green card with their diploma. So it's, I guess there, it could go different ways. We could see an expansion of, it doesn't seem like it the way things are going so far, but it's still unpredictable. I'd say other policy changes. One big one is temporary protected status. That affects individuals, but it does affect employers and business immigration. Venezuela was the first country that had their TPS extension basically yanked back by the Department of Homeland Security. We heard it was just in the last day or so, Haiti is facing the same. That these are hundreds of thousands of people who are authorized to work in the U.S. And with unemployment so low, this is going to be a big hit on American economy to lose this many workers. You look at the housing that these people have, the jobs that they do, the taxes they pay, and so on. And we don't have other people to do those jobs. We don't have, the unemployment is so low already. So that, and the other policy changes I think we're kind of getting ready for is travel restrictions, travel bans. One of the first executive orders that Trump signed was to have the agencies report back within 60 days of what countries might make sense to have travel restrictions. So maybe as early as May, in March, we might start to hear about some travel bans similar to what we saw before. They learned from the last time how to talk the talk in ways that don't get them tripped up in court so much. So they may be able to get these done without the kind of legal challenges that they had last time. We also saw with Colombia already, Trump administration tried to send back a couple planes of undocumented people to Colombia. Colombia didn't easily, kind of refuse the flights, or something happened. There was a little tiff over a weekend, and Donald Trump basically just shut down visa processing and imposed some travel restrictions for certain Colombian government officials. But we had people applying in Bogota for visas and had their appointments canceled. So any of these things, the travel restrictions, I think is going to be a big deal in the business immigration space and coming up in the next 12, 18 months for sure.
Yeah, we're also seeing, related to the visas, is we're seeing that a number of consulates were actually turning people away, canceling some of their appointments. There is a process where one could sort of waive an in-person interview, and the criteria for that sort of overnight, people are like, oh, what just happened? The rule was that, if you had been issued a visa within 48 months, you could qualify for just sort of skipping that in-person interview, and that's since dropped to 12 months. We saw that was isolated consulates, and now I think it's across the board. So these things are like, oh, how does that, is that really that big of a deal? And the reality is yes, because it just takes time. Again, it slows everybody down. On top of that, there's funding issues with staffing. We're hearing a lot of people are leaving, right? They're leaving the federal government, sometimes of their own volition, sometimes, not, right? I mean, we heard a lot of people been fired. And so I think, again, back to the issue of processing times, when you continue to have a high volume of applications with the different government agencies, as staffing shrinks, I think it's just going to make it slower, harder and harder for people, and it'll take longer and longer. So very practical, unfortunate consequences.
Yeah, and what Vince was mentioning about the visa waiver, I had a client apply in Hyderabad in India on February 14th, had a Dropbox visa waiver appointment, and was told, "I'm sorry, we don't do this anymore. With policy changed on February 12th, 2 days earlier. You'll have to make a regular appointment." So now I don't know how long this person will be stuck there. And they announced it on February 18th. I saw they put out a press release announcing the change. Similar to what Vince said, if you have a visa in any, the previous rule was if you had a visa in any category, like an F1 visa, student visa, you could apply for an H-1B visa through the Dropbox, but they changed that, and now you can only use that option if you have previously been issued a visa in the same category as the one you're applying in. So little things like that can have a big impact. Suddenly, an employer doesn't have their employee for maybe, I don't know, 2 months or so until they can get this resolved. And with data privacy issues and lots of things, it's not really so easy to just have someone work remotely from another country. So that can really impact the company and the employee.
Right. And I think with all these changes that are going on, we as practitioners, it's hard to keep up, but I think the government officials themselves they're not always up to speed, right, as to what's going on. So we've heard stories about people at the border, at the airports, who are getting pushed back by officers for, it's like, wait, that's not the rule, right? But there's so much going on. I think we saw this during Trump's first administration, that changes are happening so quickly that people just can't keep up, right? And I don't blame the officers, but by default, they're like, wait a minute, like, if I don't know what the rules are, I'm just going to take a certain stance on this, and that causes obviously problems for people who are trying legally, following the rules, trying to come to the United States, trying to resume their lives here. A lot of them are turned away or delayed because no one can keep up with what's the latest.
So I think then this would be a very interesting question. If you had the power to change one aspect of the US business immigration system, whether through legislation or policy reform, what would it be and why?
I could think of many, but it's hard to choose. I think
Adam, you go first, and I'll go. You got one on your mind?
I think one of the just the most kind of long-standing issues is Vince said we have backlogs in green card categories, green cards for people from certain countries, which seems inherently unfair. It's not that anyone targeted those countries, but we have a cap of, I think, 7% of all of the employment-based green cards can go to citizens of any one country. And we do have a lot of people from India and also from China, and there've been who have and it's all on the family-based side. There's the same kind of situation, but in employment-based, there are about 145,000 green cards that are available every year, and with this 7% limit, I would take family members out of that. So if someone has 3 kids and a spouse, that's going to take up 5 of those visas. It should just be the employees. That would be a simple kind of fix that doesn't seem too controversial. But again, I could think of many. So you go next, Vince.
All right. So I think, so one of the projects that I have students in my class do is to research the immigration process for other countries, right? And so when you sit there and you listen to what other countries are doing and how they're handling things, I'm just going to put it out there. While I think there's a lot of areas of improvement, I understand the meaning and the intent behind our system, and it's not horrible. It really isn't horrible, right? But I do think the processing times, as Adam had pointed out, is one thing. Sorry, the visa backlog. I think for me, related to that is processing times, right? I think, all the government people I talk to are well-meaning people. They want to do the right thing, but they're just overwhelmed. So like the volume, they just can't keep up with it. So either we employ more technology or we hire more people, right? Like why not hire more people? And if we are able to move things along faster, coupled with Adam's, suggestion of revisiting the immigrant visa, the numbers, I think, sure. I mean, if I'm an employer and you say, Vince, you want to hire a foreign national, you have to do a labor market test so that you can make sure you're protecting US workers. If the whole entire process is going to take me, let's say, a year or 2 years, I can do that, right? But like, a 5-year, 10-year wait, not only is the individual's professional development stunted, but the employer's like, now I'm stuck, right? And a lot of employers are not willing to do that. So I think in my mind, if you can hire more people, right? We like jobs, right? Political, love jobs, right? And you hire more people, get them to process the applications faster. That's one suggestion.
H-1B, it's a travesty that people cannot stay here when they graduate from a U.S. school. That we're not retaining the people we need to. There's a lot of politics around this, but I think there is some fraud and abuse, like anything. It's out there. So deal with that. That's fine, but don't spoil the whole program over a few bad apples who don't follow the rules. So I would be all for whatever needs to be done to fix any fraud and abuse, so that we could have sensible expansion, of H-1B visas uh, to allow companies to keep people. It's too much uncertainty for everyone involved when it's just so clear that there's a need for this talent.
Yeah, I mean, so when you talk about the lottery, there is an exception for people with advanced US degrees, right? There's a sort of a first round of lottery, and there's a sort of 20,000, those numbers set aside, I don't know whether people with US advanced degrees could skip the lottery, or people with US degrees, period, right, could skip the lottery. And, that would open up, a lot more spaces. There's also been suggestions to sort of look at the 85,000 number, and do we set it sort of to some market factor, right? I mean, there may be times when we don't need workers like that, and there may be times when we do. And we've actually done that. I can't remember the year off the top of my mind, but I think around the
Early 2000s, right?
yeah,
I think
that we went up to 205,000, right? I mean, from the 85 to about 205,000, and then it sort of sunset, it came back down. Again, the idea was that during the tech boom, right, there was such a great need that I was sure, why not, right? And in essence, they're not really harming US workers, because there are plenty of jobs during that time. So, going up, coming down, I mean, if there's a sensible way of sort of letting having the numbers fluctuate, I think that would also be very helpful to employers. And by the way, not everyone I work with wants to stay in the United States, right? I mean, they're like, yeah, I just want to be here for a few years. Can you give me an opportunity to do that? So yeah. Do you want more, Shruti?
I think to wrap up, I'd like to shift the focus to those looking to enter the field of immigration law. So given the evolving landscape, what advice do you have for students and early career attorneys interested in specializing in business immigration law?
Adam, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great field to be in. It requires maybe not for everyone, but what I love about it is that I can work on so many different things in a day, and I get a window into so many different kind of slices of the economy and jobs. I find it fascinating to learn about what people do, and to get to know clients, the organizations, and the employees to help them. Some of those Vince mentioned O1 visas. They're fascinating. These are people of extraordinary ability, and they're scientists, but they can be business people, entertainers. Immigration touches so many areas, so that's the fun thing about being a lawyer in the first place. You can do things and then get involved in many different areas. But with immigration, there's so many industries and fields and types of roles. It's a great field to be in. I think when we got in, there were about 5,000 American Immigration Lawyers Association members or so, and now it's like 16, 17,000. So it's growing, and I think it's still growing. It's a good field to get into. I would just point out there are different, if you're looking, there are different kind of categories of firms out there, and there's the high volume. There are several high volume firms that do most of the work for like your Google and Amazon and Apple, thousands of H-1B petitions, and they're set up for that. There's boutique firms, like I think Vince, the boutique immigration firms that focus on immigration and then maybe do family and citizenship and removal perhaps in different areas, and it's nice because you get to really be a lawyer and do more lawyering than you can at the high volume firms that need to just churn out thousands of cases every year. And then a full service firm like my situation, some of the benefits, it's kind of like a boutique firm in some ways, but we have a lot more. They're not really set up in our firm to do immigration with 700, 800 lawyers or whatever, and there are 10 of us do immigration. So we have a lot of red tape and administrative stuff. We can't really organize ourselves as efficiently just to get new clients onboarded and things like that. But but the advantage is we get to partner with colleagues in corporate and tax and other areas and work on projects that touch, where immigration is a component. M&A comes up quite a lot. And so pros and cons of all of these, and different for different parts of your career. Sometimes a lot of people starting out go to the high volume firms, get experience. There are a lot of jobs there, learn the basics, a lot of repetition. But a lot of times you're niched into a certain type of case type, or you're doing one thing over and over, and you don't quite get the full experience and range of immigration, which is important because I'm sure Vince will agree, when someone walks into your office, knowing all the different things that could be done, even if someone, asylum or whatever it may be. There's all kinds of options out there, and having some experience in all of that is really important.
Yeah, no, I agree everything with Adam had said. I mean, I've been practicing since 1997. I think I'm undiagnosed with ADHD. I'm surprised I'm still doing this. It's because it's so interesting. It really is. And I will say the other piece of it from a professional development level, you're always learning. There's lots to learn. I mean, I never stop learning. And on top of that, I don't know if Adam would comment on this, but a lot of the attorneys in the immigration bar, technically we're competitors, but it is so collegial. I mean, some of my best friends, right, are from the immigration bar, which people are like, you guys talk about the same thing all the time. Like, aren't you bored of each other? And we really enjoy each other's company. But it's a great field. It touches employment law, it touches corporate law, it touches tax, it touches all sorts of areas. And so in that sense, I think, one of the questions people often ask me is, well, how do you prepare for a job in that field? And I would say, obviously, take an immigration course. But, if you can take some of these other courses like corporations and tax and employment, right? These different areas, I think it'll really help. So, someone like Adam, who may be in a general practice firm, he can call on his colleagues, right, and ask them some questions. If you're on your own, or if you're in a smaller firm, I'd say make sure you're in a good network. Like, I have employment lawyers I talk to, or tax attorneys I talk to, when these issues arise, so that I can advise my clients better. So it's a good field. I'd say definitely do that. As an employer myself, oftentimes people will ask, well, Vince, what do you look for, right? How do I get a job, right? I'd say, again, cover these courses, but really demonstrate that you are interested in immigration. And that could be in volunteer work, that could be in getting involved. I know AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, has, I think it's a very, very minimum membership for students, for law students. So, get involved that way. I know the AILA New England chapter is very active. So yeah, get involved, get your name out there. Have coffee with other alum, other immigration attorneys, so that they know who you are, and they know that you're real, right? You really do want a job in that field.
If I may jump in for a moment, I just wanted to, first of all, commend both of you. This has been fantastically interesting, but also to emphasize how much I agree with everything you just said, and to point out that at Boston College, we have one of the oldest and most well-established immigration programs in the country. We now have at least 4 full-time faculty members who have expertise in immigration, including clinical programs and refugee law. And we work very hard at facilitating these intersections between family law and immigration law, or unfortunately, sometimes it comes up criminal law and immigration law, or corporate law and immigration law. And also the advantage of a program like ours is that we have a very extensive alumni network from which we get fantastic adjunct faculty like Vincent who come back to the law school, but also there's a lot of people out there who students can meet with and talk to, have a cup of coffee with, and get a sense of what life in the practice is really. So I agree. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, and the collegiality of the bar has been legendary for 30 years, and it hasn't changed. And that's really wonderful to see that it's continuing. I think we're in a difficult period right now, a particularly difficult period. Not only is this administration not going to expand the number of government employees to adjudicate H-1Bs, but they just cut half the Board of Immigration Appeals. They're laying off immigration judges. So we're going to be in the trenches for a little while. But this has happened before. There's always been a sort of episodic thing in this country. And I think with the energy and enthusiasm that people in this field have, and the vigor of immigrants themselves, and people who want to live in this country or people who want to stay in this country, I'm still pretty optimistic about the long-term possibilities here.
No, I think Professor Canstrom, that's a really good point. Like, we are around for a long time, right? We're not going to let one particular person or one particular administration, right, ruin something that's that's really important to our country. I remind my team this, like, I come in, like, we're doing important work, impactful work. Now, obviously, make sure you're taking care of yourself, watch out for your own well-being and your health. But we'll ride through this together. So, whether it's as practitioners, professors, students, all of us, interested in the immigration space, I think there's definitely a lot for us to do together.
Also throw out nonprofit organizations. There are opportunities to get into the field through nonprofit organizations, and so look at that option also if that's of interest to you.
Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion. So we now have a little time for audience questions. Audience, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box, and Anne will take it from there.
So we have the first question here, and one of our audience members are asking, what are the main trends for employment-based adjudication from the US CIS currently?
We're going to see a lot of things that we saw in the first Trump administration. I'm starting to get challenges already on H-1B petitions related to the prevailing wage and the labor condition application as the Department of Labor part of it. So that's one trend that I'm starting to see, and visa processing is a little more unpredictable now.
Yeah, another trend that we've been seeing is, again, and not surprisingly, is the idea of in order for one to qualify for an H-1B, you have to show that the job is a specialty occupation. So we are seeing the Immigration Service questioning, like the occupational code, right, that we may choose, or whether or not something really requires a degree in a specific field of study. So it's we anticipate it'd be challenging. We survived the last 4 years, and we can do this. Yeah.
And there's another question. How common and how possible is it to combine a pro bono immigration practice with a business immigration day job?
I'd love to take this. This is a great question, or start us off. Very possible. One of the things I love about working in a large law firm, there are a lot of people who are interested in doing some immigration work or doing pro bono work, and we can kind of mentor them a little bit and coordinate getting them connected with organizations that do Violence Against Women Act cases or asylum cases, refugee applications for people abroad, all kinds of opportunities. So I think there's definitely, if someone is hesitant about so to speak, selling their soul and going to work for a big law firm, for big corporations, all 100%. You can do that, and you can pay off your student loans or whatever you have to do, and you can do pro bono work at the same time and actually make a difference. There are lots of opportunities and ways to do that, especially in immigration, or even if you're not going into immigration, if you're doing something else, you can do pro bono work, and most large law firms and others, I mean, that's totally encouraged, and we require it. Our firm has a 100% participation, pro bono work, and so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's completely possible. At the end of the day, I guess I do wonder where is that question coming from, right? So I would say at the end of the day, make sure you're doing work you really love to do, right? So that you don't have to compartmentalize. These 30 hours are, I don't want to do this, but I got to do this, and these 10 hours of what I love to do, right? If you can find a place where you can do both, or it being one, I think it's great. There's also, Adam had pointed out, there's plenty of nonprofit organizations or even for-profit organizations where you can do really impactful work. So I would say, there really a lot of, the wonderful thing about immigration is that there's a need. There's always a need. So I think if you're able to balance your life and figure out what you want to do, how do you want to spend your time, that's something to look for. At our firm, I recognize not everyone wants to do pro bono work in immigration, right? So we've actually set aside some time to allow people to, we have we have a set aside period of time. It's like, hey, the firm will pay you for your time. If you want to go ahead and get involved in the community in pro bono work or some other type of meaningful activity. And a lot of them have been doing immigration clinics that are popping up around the country.
And it looks like there's just one last question. Do you think an LLM program is enough for a foreign student to practice immigration law?
I've seen this. So there are certain states, I think New York is one. The one thing that's nice about immigration law is you just have to be licensed in one state because it's all federal. Or I mean, there's some maybe state laws can come into play, but you can basically do it with a license from any state, be a practicing immigration lawyer. So I think New York is the one I know about that you can sit for the bar exam with an LLM and you don't have a USJD.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. So long as you can get the license in any one of the 50 states, then it's fine because it's federal.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for your time. This is very insightful.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a kind of therapy talking about it.
Yes. No, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay. So for anyone who joined after the start of the program, my name's Ann Sullivan. I'm the Assistant Director of our LLM program here at Boston College Law School. I'm now going to take you through a little bit of an informational session about our LLM program, just so you can learn a little bit more and see what Boston College has to offer you. I will be sharing my screen. So first, a little bit about the school. We were established in 1929. We have over 14,000 alums with approximately 700 students enrolled. And this current year, we have 13 LLM students. We offer many, many different courses, and our LLM students, as well as our JD students, are allowed to select any classes that are most of interest to them, particularly in the LLM program, because you are here with us for only a year. You have a lot of flexibility to ensure that you are able to take courses that are of interest to you and would benefit your career. We also have many, many different student groups and organizations at the law school, which helps foster a sense of community. And it also is another place where you can find a more concentrated focus on anything that interests you, whether it be related to law or whether it be more of a personal group. So why would BC Law be a good place for you to do your LLM? Our LLM program is unique in the sense that all of our LLM students take courses alongside JD students. You are part of the whole of Boston College. You're not kept separate. So you have the ability to benefit from our renowned faculty. We also keep our LLM program small. As I said, this year we have about 13 LLM students. We do this intentionally to make sure that during your year with us, you get individualized attention and you are really supported to make sure that you are successful while you're here and after you graduate and when you enter the professional market. As part of that, you have access to our career service office. We have 2 designated advisors specifically for LLM students, and they host workshops throughout the year to help make sure that you are prepared and you are fostering those connections that will help you later on when you are applying for positions. And again, you're fully immersed. You're able to take the classes you wish. You're able to work alongside students. You're able to pursue research. All of the opportunities that are available to our JD students are available to LLM students. And Boston College is a very highly ranked university, so you are coming to a well-established program. During our LLM program, there are 2 mandatory courses that our LLM students must take. The first is the United States legal system, and the second is legal research and writing for LLMs. These serve 2 purposes. They help you take them your first semester, the fall semester, and that helps you get your grounding in the United States, the legal system, and the writing as well will also help you be prepared to succeed in your other classes. We want to make sure that you are set up to succeed, and we want to help you. We offer 5 different concentrations. Concentrations are not mandatory, but we offer them to give you a roadmap if there's a particular focus that you want to pursue. Those concentrations are business and commercial law, environmental law, human rights law, intellectual property, and taxation. Again, you can choose to do a concentration that will take up about half of your credits, or if you're not sure what you want to do or you want more flexibility with your schedule, you can choose not to do a concentration and build your schedule yourself. During the full year with us, there are 2 semesters. You take a minimum of 12 credits each semester. So a minimum of 24 credits during your entire year. That equates to about 7 to 9 classes. And before each semester, you'll receive tailored guidance to make sure that you are on the correct path. You're taking courses that suit your goals, and that will prepare you for the bar exam if you choose to take it, or for your future career. So why would you consider doing an LLM degree? An LLM degree is of particular interest to international students who want to come study in the United States. We see students who come to the United States who wish to remain in the United States and practice here, and some of our students want to take their degree back to their home country and use it there. We also see some US-based students who are pursuing an LLM to gain a more focused understanding of a particular subject and really strengthen their understanding. These students typically are interested in entering academia and pursuing a teaching career. So in order to qualify for our program, you must have a law degree outside of the United States. Typically, this is an LLB. And then that degree needs, if you're coming from the United States, it needs to be an ABA approved school. And you should have a strong interest in wanting to take law. This is a very rigorous program, but you would receive a lot of benefit by doing it. So currently our class has 13 students. They're from 9 different countries. They're from the United States, Denmark, Turkey, India, Venezuela, Italy, France, and Colombia. So it truly is a global program. We get students from all over the world come to join us. and you'll have the opportunity to meet all of them, learn from their experiences. Everyone brings something different to the table, and from that, you really get to benefit. 38% of these students have advanced legal degrees, meaning it's further than just the simple LLB. 69% of our students this year are on F1 visas, which means they're coming from internationally and are on a student visa to study here, and the rest are US residents. In order to apply, you will need to submit an application through LSAC. It will allow you to submit all of your documentation to us in a verified setting. Applications opened on September 16th, and we will receive them until June 16th. We do review applications on a rolling basis, meaning once you submit it, we will begin reviewing it, and you will have that decision shortly after. So we do recommend that you apply when you're ready. With that, you'll need to submit the application form that will automatically be generated in LSAC. You'll then need to upload a resume or CV, a statement of purpose, 3 letters of recommendation, your official transcripts that are translated into English. That is another thing that the LSAC software can help you with. And then official TOEFL or IELTS scores. These are English exams to show us that your English ability, because we want you to succeed in these classes as they are all taught in English. If you have received your legal education entirely in English, this requirement can be waived. If you have any questions at all about our program, you can reach out to our inbox at BCLL. The address is bcllm@bc.edu. You can also reach us by phone at 617-552-1113. We are always happy to hear from you and always happy to answer any questions you have. If you reach out to that email inbox, you can also arrange for a one-on-one meeting if you have specific questions to your situation, or if you have anything that you want to know about our program. So now I would like to introduce to you 2 of our LLM students, Tobias and Alejandra. They're going to tell you a little bit about their experience this year with the LLM program, just so you can hear from the students currently in our program. So if you 2 would like to take it away.
Do you want me to start? Thank you, Anne. Alejandro, do you want me to start or do you want to start?
Yes, please, Toby. You can start.
Okay, so my name is Tobias. I am an LLM student from Denmark, and I did my 3 years Bachelor's of Laws at the University of Copenhagen, followed by a 2-year Master of Laws at the University of Copenhagen. And my experience at Boston College Law School has been that it's the perfect school for an LLM student. I think that one of the things that I was looking for when I was searching for LLMs in the US, because there are quite a few, was that I wanted an experience like that of the US JD students. I wanted an experience where I can have the same classes as they do and the same opportunities, because my goal has always wanted to stay in the US. And for me, that also meant being able to show the same skills and competences that those JD students have had. So for me, while I've been at Boston College Law School, I actually haven't done a concentration, but instead I've had a more general view and more fundamental courses. So one of the benefits I think is I've had civil procedure together with the JD courses, section 2, and I've had also criminal law this semester. I also had contracts, and all the professors are exceptional. Further, the BC at times allows you to do clinics. And so I'm also part of the Life of Parole Clinic, where I represent lifetime inmates in front of the parole board in Massachusetts. So all in all, I think the experience at BC has been great, and I think it's setting you up to have a great career in the US.
Okay, I joined to these words. I introduce myself. My name is Alejandra Aldana. I come from Colombia. I'm an LLM student right now as well. And how I ended up here is a little bit different than Toby's. I applied through my home university. I always wanted to have like an experience abroad, and I think this was the perfect opportunity to do so. I'm doing a concentration right now. I'm doing the human rights concentration, and I think there are like 5 different concentrations you can choose to do. And that has been also a good experience because I'm doing the same concentration in Colombia, in my studies in Colombia. So it was nice to do the same concentration, but in different countries that is completely different. So that has been also a great experience to be able to do this concentration. In general, this experience, not only in BC, but in general, studying in Boston has been a very enriching experience, not only in a academic level, but also in a personal level. It has been also quite a challenge in different aspects. For me, I have never studied in English. So that this is like sometimes can be a little bit hard, but it's also nice to see how professors and students are also very understanding with this, and they help you along the way the whole time. Also for me, it was a little bit hard at the beginning because the system is completely different. Like the way that we are taught in Colombia, it's a little bit different than the way they're here taught, and that has been like quite a challenge. But again, as Toby was saying, the professors here are exceptional. They're really interested in you and to help you along the way. So it was just like a couple of weeks when you could just get used to everything, but then the rest of the way has been very nice. And also in general, life in BC, BC has a very strong sense of community, and not only like in BC, you can, for example, if you're interested in, I don't know, in criminal law, in international law, there are different clubs, societies, and groups you can join, and events almost every single week. But besides law school, also in BC in general, there are a lot of groups, communities, faith communities, sports, a lot of activities you can do, events you can join. So the life in general in BC, it's really fun. It's really interesting. You get to meet a lot of people, to do networking, to plan for your future. There are a lot of opportunities and activities you can do the whole time. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to be here, very grateful for this experience. And I hope that you can also join sometime and enjoy this great experience.
So I just have a couple questions for you guys, just to delve a little bit deeper into your experiences. Could you tell us a little bit about your favorite class that you've taken so far, if you have one?
Yeah, I can start again if you want. I think my favorite class, I'll actually say two. I'll say two. I think my first and favorite class during my first semester was my contracts class. I think that my contracts class, while contracts wasn't that different from what it was in a civil law country like Denmark, I think that the professor I had was absolutely amazing. In Denmark, there's this kind of, I wouldn't say hierarchy between professors and students, but you don't really go to office hours. You don't really see your professors. And I think that one of the things that is so great about Boston College Law School is that there isn't that hierarchy. Just a couple of weeks ago, I met my professor in contracts at the bus stop, and he was actually interested in me, and he wanted to hear, oh, what were you doing in Denmark? And obviously, there's some things going on, what I thought about that situation. And it just kind of allows you to kind of gain that perspective on it, that everyone is so friendly. They really do want you to succeed. And I have no doubt that they would help you too if you were looking for a job. So that was my first semester. And the professors are absolutely exceptional. My second semester, I would say that the clinic that I'm doing brings some really valuable practical experience. So I used to work within the Ministry of Justice in Denmark with lifetime prisoners, but BC allowing me to have that opportunity to also work with my interest here in the US is absolutely phenomenal. And it's something that, looking at other LLM programs, at least when I was applying, is something that I couldn't find other places. I feel like the opportunities that you provide at this school are absolutely crazy. I was about to say it's great, and both Anne and the director of the LLM program, Sergio Campus, are both great in trying to help you achieve those dreams that you have and kind of experiment with whatever you want to experiment with.
So for me, I think it's also hard to choose just one course. I think all of them are completely different, and I have loved all my courses. One course that I took last semester that I really liked was prosecutorial ethics. In Colombia, we have a lot of courses, mandatory courses actually, that are related to criminal law, but we don't have like a specific one that only talks about ethical issues. and the ethics in general. And this semester, actually, I'm also taking professional responsibility that is also all about ethics. And I think this is very important for lawyers. And I really like that this university, BC, has a lot of that is really important to have these courses, and that we get to know not only about the laws and the rules in general, but also how to be a lawyer and how to be a good loyal and an ethical lawyer. So that one was really interesting. I also liked the US legal system because I didn't know much about the US legal system in general. I know it's completely different from Colombia, civil law country, common law system here. And it's completely different. So it was like a good basis to start. And now, for example, in my constitutional law class, I have a lot of topics that we're talking about that we discussed last semester with Professor Campos. So that was really nice to have like a general view of the most important things that we need to know about this system, and to prepare ourselves as LLM students, because since we're having the other courses with JDs that live here and have always been here and they already know a little bit more about the system, it was really nice also for us LLMs to get this general knowledge at the beginning of the semester, so that now we can be a little bit more prepared and understand classes better. And those courses were really, really nice for me.
How have you both, how was your experience taking courses alongside JD students?
I think that the thought of it is more intimidating than actually doing it. I think that I was rather scared because you're also graded on the same curve as the JD students are. And as such, you think, oh, am I good enough? Can I write enough for my exam? But I think it's also important that you need to remember that you are coming with a different background than those JD students. You have done a legal education before, you're used to legal writing, and you actually aren't that disadvantaged that you think that you might be. So it was certainly intimidating, even more intimidating up to the finals, but you learn to live with it, and you actually realize there isn't that much difference. You already did a TOEFL test, or you've already done an education before you come to BC. So you know that you have that level that's required to perform in the exams. And I think that, again, I think there's like the realization that you gain so much more from an employer being able to show that you've competed with JD students rather than some of those programs where you just compete with LLM students, right? Because then there can either be an inflation in grades or something like that. But here, the employers, they know that LLM students are graded on the same curve. And it's something, at least in my job search, has helped me quite a lot to explain that no, there wasn't any differentiation. I was graded the same way the JD students are. So if I got an A or if I got a B, it was in the same manner as the JD students. We both had to perform at the same level. And I think actually that's one of the strengths of the program rather than something people should be intimidated of.
Yes, I was going to say something similar. I think that's one of the best part, and also the most hard part, because, for example, in my case, I didn't know about that. I remember when I was talking with this other student from Colombia that went last year to this same program, when she told me that she was having the classes with the JDs and that she only had like 1 or 2 courses with the LLMs. I was so scared because I know that we're like not competing, but the same time in the same room, in the same courses, and with the curve and all that system, with people that have been studying in English their whole life. They speak English, they know the system better, they have been studying here for their probably whole lives. So it was really intimidating at the beginning, and I was really worried about it. I think it's still, for me personally, a little bit hard sometimes still, because I don't like really participating in English. I feel very intimidated. But I would just say, don't be like me. Like, it doesn't matter if you participate in English and your words are not perfectly good, organized, or whatever. Like, people understand that. And also, I was talking also the other day with the JD, and we were talking about this, that I don't like participating in English sometimes because I feel like my English is not that good, and I probably can say, I don't know, something wrong or whatever. And he was saying, like, it's even better for you to do it because people know that you're putting even more effort, and you should be proud of it as well. Like, you're not competing, but like you're comparing yourself with people that are that speak English for like native language, and doing it and having classes with them the whole time is a challenge. But once you're already there, it's something you should be also proud of and just feel confident. And I think that's a good thing, that we're not always just the LLMs like in a side, because we have to know that after after our studies here in BC, we're going to be competing in that moment. We're going to be competing with JDs the whole time. So it's like a preparation for the future. And I think it's a really good thing that this program has, and I wouldn't change it. Like it can be a little bit stressful at the beginning, but then is the best thing we can have to prepare ourselves.
And I think also, just to say one last thing, I think it's also important to remember, at least for me, that the JD students and you're competing with them, it goes beyond academics. So an example, I had two 1L classes that had the contracts and I had civil procedure. And the best part, one of the good parts about BC program is that on one hand, you have your LLM group that you're doing classes with your first semester, and you hang out and you go to the different kind of events and also parties that BC has. And on the other hand, for me, because I was part of section 2, at the same time, I would be invited to the events with the JD students. So after we had finished all our exams in December, I went out with my section and we had a good time at a bar. And because of that, it's absolutely great that you're kind of immersed in both those programs. And I think, again, it's something that you do not see at other schools. It's only at BC, at least when I researched the different schools. So the social life is absolutely great and phenomenal.
Yeah, you've both kind of been touching on this, but how have you found the Boston College community, both in the law school or a little bit broader?
Do you want to start this one, Alejandra?
Okay. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, BC has a very strong sense of community, and you can find communities everywhere, like not only in law school. So first, people in general are very nice to you. Everyone is very friendly. It's a good opportunity to make new friends, to get to know new people, not only from the LLMs in different countries, but also from here. As I was saying also in the beginning, there's a lot of groups, societies where you can be part of, and that's also a very important part of this experience. And in a little bit more general in BC, there are also a lot of groups and communities that you can join. For example, in my case, I'm very Catholic, and the university, BC, is also Catholic, but not only for Catholic people, but in general, every religion. There are a lot of groups and communities that you can be part of. So there are groups just for girls, just for boys, for different activities, events. So it's not only in BC law school that you in class that you get to meet other people, but like in general, outside the class, in every lunch they have events and, for example, communities for Latinos, for Asian people, for different regions. There are a lot of groups for everything, not only in BC Law School, but in general in BC. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages of this university, that you're not going to be alone. You're not going to feel alone ever if you want to, because there are always a lot of opportunities and groups you can join. So that's something I really like about BC.
And I think while Alejandra took the more social approach, I think academically and also professionally, there's such a benefit to the BC community. So at the University of Copenhagen, where I came from, we have 3 law schools in Denmark, and it doesn't really matter where you went because everyone comes out with the same degree. And you don't really do those. I remember before I came here, I always read, oh, you invite the previous alumni to a coffee meeting. And I thought that was ridiculous. But then I came to BC, and then I realized, I think I was part of a panel and event, and one of the participants said, BC alumni are like a cult. And I think I can reflect myself in that, in the sense of when you meet someone from Boston College Law School out in the world, at a workplace, at a networking event, and you say, oh, I'm also from BC, at that point, you already have something in common and you can start talking about that. And it helps you so much in your job search. I also think it's important to remember that BC provides you all the opportunities to succeed. And I would also even say potentially get a job. So if you're willing to take those opportunities and chase those opportunities, they certainly exist. I have been at numerous job interviews where I've said, oh, I'm from BC. And there's both a part where some of them will say, oh, I'm from BC too. And already there, you're a little bit better standard. And the second part is BC also has a really, really good reputation in the US, especially in Massachusetts. But for me, an example, I'm going to have a clerkship down in Arizona at the Court of Appeals. And even then, I remember the judge that I was speaking with said, wow, Boston College, that's a really, really good school. So the reputation isn't just in Massachusetts, but it's all over the US. And I think that's a huge benefit to the program.
And Another thing I'll ask of you, you both came from countries outside of the United States. How was your move to Boston and how were you able to adjust?
You want to start, Toby?
Yeah, I can start. So for me, I had been to the US a couple times before. I have a girlfriend that's from the US, and as such, I have been visiting her quite a few times. So being in the US wasn't that strange for me, but visiting a country and living in a country and moving there is certainly two different things. I would say that there's still times where I get a little shocked and I'm like, what is that? Or I'm culturally shocked. As soon as today, I had a class before this in my clinic. And I remember someone said that one of the inmates had written about the Cheesecake Factory. I thought, what is that about, right? And so at that point, I got the perspective, oh, it's actually like just a normal restaurant, right? That was if he got out, he would want to go there. And so there are those cultural differences. And while it might seem slightly ridiculous to mention that example, there will be a few things or many things that you don't understand. But again, my interpretation is that the cultural side, you have the LLM people to experience all of that with. You have a great knitted community. And I think from the academic side, what do I do with, like, I applied for a work visa yesterday. What do I do with that? And Anne had arranged that we actually had one of the immigration people come from the OISS at BC, so the immigration office at BC. So they came out and they helped us. She even helped me file out the forms because I asked her and I was extremely nervous. It wasn't that difficult. And everything from the start of immigration to the end of immigration, a job search, everything. BC is there to help you with whatever you want. Again, they provide the opportunities and it's all about accepting those opportunities. And I'm sure they'll be there.
Okay, yeah. So for me, moving here was a big change. I have never, the longest time I've been abroad for studies or something was like, I don't know, 5 years ago for 3 months for an exchange, and that's it. But not really like for studying and moving for at least 1 year. And I think it has been a very enriching experience because not only in a like academic perspective, but in a personal way, being completely independent and that you are the only one responsible for all your things and responsibilities was a big change for me. I have always lived with my family. So when I got here and realizing that I'm the only one responsible for doing the laundry, cooking, going grocery shopping, and at the same time managing my time to be able to do all my studies. And I also have some courses from Colombia that I haven't completed yet, so I'm doing it right now at the same time. So doing all those things at the same time was quite of a shock at the beginning, and I was really frustrated because it's like in Colombia, I thought I didn't have enough time for studies, and now that I have to be responsible for everything else, it's like, how can I do it? And then you realize that you just learn how to do it, and there's always time for everything. So I think that was one of the biggest I don't know how to say it, like from the things that I have learned the most. Yeah, how to manage my time. And also, as Tubby was saying, in the university in BC Law, there are always people helping you out with whatever you need. So at the beginning, I was also very lost with all the events that we have, how does this work? How do you, I don't know, how do you research in the US, or how do you use the website from the Canvas website where we have all the courses and the information for the courses. All that at the beginning was like a whole experience that I was going to learn, and I didn't know anything about it. So there's always people around you helping you out and being there for you, whatever you need. There's a lot of support in general in the university with whatever you need. But yeah, I think in general, the experience moving here has been one of the most enriching experience I've had in my life. And I think it's also preparation for the future because we're not going to be there with our family the whole time, and we have to just become independent and responsible for our things. And yeah, it has been a really good experience. Also, as I was saying at the beginning, the fact of talking a new language for me in another culture, all of that is part of the change, but it's also really nice to see a different culture, different people, different I don't know, activities that people do here. The food is even different, everything is different, but it's part of the experience, and you get to really enjoy it and get used to the things that probably at the beginning are hard for you, but then you start missing it when you're out. So sometimes, for example, when I'm in Colombia, I miss things from Boston and from BC even. Like, it's just a whole new experience, but you you start liking it and loving it as part of your life. So yeah.
I'm seeing a question in the Q&A section that I can jump in and answer about our program. I'm seeing from Daniel, do we offer scholarships for the program? Yes, we do for our students that are applying directly to our program. We consider all of them for scholarships. There is no additional application to be considered for these scholarships. And the scholarships are quite competitive. We want to make sure that we're able to support you. We don't offer full scholarships at this time, but again, we do offer competitive scholarships. And I'm seeing specifically in Alejandra's case, she's here through one of our partner schools. We have agreements with certain schools where they can send us some of their top students directly to us through our agreement, and they can get their LLM degree with us. I'm seeing another question. Are there remote options for the LLM program? Does it have to be completed within a year, or could it be part-time opportunity taken over a few years? So we don't offer a remote option. All of our classes are taught in person. You don't necessarily have to do it within 1 year, but if you want to take the bar exam in the United States, you do need to complete the program within 48 months of matriculation. But again, it's a full-time in-person program. The only time we see a circumstance where we have to be concerned about completing it within the 48 months is if a student needs to take a leave of absence, but typically the students go straight through 2 semesters. You start in August and you graduate in May. Also, if anyone in the audience also has other questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A box below. In the meantime, I'll ask you to, I know it's on all of our minds right now. How have you found the winters to be? How have you adjusted to that?
I think you start with this one, Alejandra.
Toby knows how much I have suffered with it. No, I'm just kidding. It has been a little bit hard for me, especially because I've never been in winter before. In Colombia, we don't have seasons, and usually my family doesn't like winter as well. So we usually just travel in summer when we go other places. So it was actually my first time seeing snow. I've never seen it before. And I really liked it. Like, I don't know, it's just a whole experience. Sometimes you feel like, okay, maybe it's getting a little bit long. It could be a little bit warm already, but it's not. But it's not that bad. Like, you just get used to it. And it's just when you go outside and then you're inside again and you just have to take your jacket because it's already warm inside. So it's just, I think, part of the experience. It was also hard for me to see how short the days were. Like when it's, I don't know, 4 in the afternoon, it's already dark, and so at some point of the year, it's like, what is this? But it's just like you just get used to it, and it's not that bad.
Yeah, I think for me that in Denmark it certainly also snows. But the weird thing about Boston, and especially Massachusetts, is this thing of you'll have it, especially in the fall, you'll have it really warm one day, and then the next day it's just -degrees. And so it keeps fluctuating between being very warm and very, very cold, which is very strange. But like everything in life, you get used to it. And so even Alejandra, if she can get used to it, I believe everyone can. And so there's certain you definitely do get used to it. I think one of the things that's one of the perks here is that by living in Boston, is that you also get snow on the ground and then it's sunny outside. And it's simply so beautiful when you're inside and you can kind of see the snow still laying and the sun is shining in on you. It's absolutely amazing. And I think Boston is definitely one of the prettiest US cities I've been to, if not the prettiest. And if you're from Europe, especially, and you're scared like I was going to a US city thinking, oh no, it's going to be unsafe and all these things you read online, I would say Boston is definitely the most safe US city, big city in the US. And even from Copenhagen, if you've ever been there, it resembles me quite a bit of Copenhagen in the sense of there is public transport here. It might not be the best, but it does exist. And there's never been any points in Boston where I felt unsafe. And I think that's something that, at least for me, was very, very important when I was choosing a school. Was I could be somewhere where I could also go out at night, be with friends, and I would never feel unsafe. And I think, yeah, I haven't ever felt unsafe. So that's really, really nice.
Okay, I'm seeing another question that I can take. If the LLM class is selective, what should an applicant do to put in a good application? So many of our applicants come from different points in their career. Some people have just finished their first law degree, and others have been practicing for several years. So because of all these backgrounds, we really look at everything that you submit and try to really build a profile for you. So that way we can evaluate your preparedness for the program and whether you would be a good fit. So as part of this, a great opportunity would be letters of recommendation. We would love to hear from your professors, or if you're working in the field, one of your employers. Again, we're trying to get the best understanding of you that we can before we issue a final decision. For students who have just graduated and are applying immediately to the program, of course, you would have more to show in terms of your transcripts and your current academic experiences. Whereas if you've been working in the field, your resume would really provide us a lot of that information and show the work that you've done. So it really depends on your situation, but the more you can submit to us that builds the full picture of who you are as a student and who you are as a professional would be your best opportunity. And then my final question for both of you will be, are there anything that you would recommend to students who are considering Boston College or who are choosing to come to Boston College? Are there any recommendations you would have for them?
Yeah, I'll start then. I think that my biggest recommendation would be, if you were to be accepted, which I hope you will, is that you should go for 1L classes. You should go for the classes that the JD students have in their first year. It might seem intimidating that you're choosing the same classes as them, but from experience, being able to say that, yes, I've had civil procedure, or yes, I've had contracts, or I've had criminal law, having those classes, if you want to stay in the US at least, will show your potential employer so much more than potentially just having had seminars. And that's not to say that seminars are bad in any way, because specialization is certainly also a way where you can obtain a job. But for me, who didn't necessarily know where my interest of law was yet, being able to choose those fundamental courses to show to my employer, I do have the same skills. I've been indoctrinated as a US student is certainly something that helped me. And then I would say, if you had to choose one class, I would choose contracts, one with Frank Garcia. It's absolutely great. Great professor, the guy from the bus stop. And I think that's going to show you both understanding of the US and just, yeah, in general. He's great. And to finish that point off about my courses, when you are looking at other LLM programs, I think that and if you're considering applying there, I think you should really look into what they provide for you. There's so many things, at least from my experience, that other LLM programs say that they provide, but they don't necessarily. One of the things I think is great about BC, as I also said before, you get to take 1L courses. It's never been hidden. It says it on the website. But if you were to go to some of the other schools that are in Boston that has LLM programs, you're not allowed to do 1L classes. Those are kept away for the JD students, and you're forced to take those upper level classes, which I think, again, it has its own benefits, but BC is special because having those 1L classes, you're integrated with the JD students and you get friends and you get a network, and it's so important. That was the most important factor for me choosing Boston College Law School.
Okay, yes, and besides that, I will also suggest to use all the tools and resources that the university has for you to make all this path easier. I say it because in my experience, I have missed a lot of things that would have been helpful if I had used them. For example, last semester, we had a workshop for LLMs that was for preparing our resumes. And that day I had something and I was like, no, I can't go right now and I can do it later. It's not going to be a big deal. So I just I'm just gonna prepare it later. And then I realized that the resumes, how we do it in Colombia, is completely different than how they do it here, and they have like a specific format and a lot of rules that you have to follow. And it took me even longer to get like an appointment with the academic advisor and to review it again and do it and correct it. It was like a long process because I didn't attend to that workshop that was given and made for us, specifically for us. So there are a lot of tools, events. Also, for example, in every single class, you can take office hours with the professor or with the teaching assistant. If you don't understand something, just go straight to the professor. They can help you. There are a lot of people trying to help you the whole time, and sometimes because you're just busy thinking about different things, you don't really use them. So just use everything that you have, all the resources, all the tools, or the activities that you can be part of. That'll be one of my suggestions. Also, if you believe that you're probably struggling with English or you're not completely prepared because you haven't studied before in English or something, you can also first believe that it's not that bad, like you just get used to it. And if you think that professors are gonna talk too fast and you're not gonna understand, it's gonna take you probably, I don't know, 2 weeks to adjust your brain in English, and then it's gonna be fine. And also to prepare yourself, something that I did last year, exactly 1 year ago when I was applying for this. I just started to prepare myself because I felt like I was not ready for it. So I started watching, I don't know, series in English, reading a book in English, trying to talk in English somehow, like just try to prepare yourself already. You still have time for all those things that you need, that probably you feel like you can improve. You just still have time for prepare that. And also, as Toby was saying, I will also suggest to once you're in BC to try to take different courses. For example, I was very interested in criminal law. When I was in Colombia, I was completely sure I was gonna just do criminal law in the future. And then I got here and I started taking different courses, even criminal law courses. And for some reason, I started changing my my beliefs and my interests. So I will suggest just to try different things if you're not sure about what you want to do. Also, Toby, I think this semester, last semester, and me last semester, we took different clinics. I think it's also a great experience to be able to take clinics. In my case, it was an international human rights clinic. We were working on a research in artificial intelligence with the Redesca, and well, it was like a whole activity the whole semester. It was really a very good experience to be able to not only go to all the same classes, but try to choose different classes, seminars, other clinics, or different type of topics and courses. And so you can enjoy this experience even more and get to know the US legal system in general a little bit better. And to enjoy it in general, like I think sometimes we just get really stressed about all the things that we have to do and all the courses and all the exams, and we're worried about all of so many things that at the end is just 1 year. It's actually very short, the time flies. So I will just say, like, try to enjoy yourself here, not to focus only on the studies, but to use this experience also for your personal level and your personal life. So to manage time, to be able to, I don't know, go to the gym and go out with friends, and also have time for studies. And if you want to work, also work, but to enjoy the whole experience. Is once in a lifetime probably. And I think it's not only about the studies, but also about your personal life and how you can use this experience for your personal growth. So I think it's just to enjoy it and to make this the best experience you can make of it. And yeah.
And I think also to just say a very last thing, like at least on my part, and I think Alejandro too, like if there's anything that you're worried about, oh, they're sitting here with Anne, and Anne is the director, I don't want to ask my question because maybe she'll not let me in. What do I know? Like, feel free to reach out to both me and Alejandra about those questions that you might have, or maybe you're nervous about something, or even when you arrive. We've been in your position, and we are in your position right now. We've also been applying, so feel free with any questions you might have. One of the things that I'm feeling right now when I'm moving to Arizona is, what are the safe areas? Where can I live? Maybe if you don't know anyone here, like, feel free to reach out to us. It can be the silliest question, or it can be something about the academic program. We're more than happy to help, because yeah, we really value this, and we believe you should apply because it's a great experience. I'm at least, and I know Alejandro too, is extremely grateful and also happy for this program.
Yeah, Tobias, as you just sort of mentioned, the two of you are about to become part of our alumni base. So you're about to become what you were talking about before. So our next session will begin at 1 p.m. So we're going to take a brief break and then come back at 1. Thank you both very much. So now that it's 1, Victoria and Maria, why don't you introduce yourselves and we can jump into the panel.
Right. Thank you so much. Well, my name is Victoria, as you can read on the Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us on this project. We really appreciate it. I think I'm speaking for me, Maria, but also all the LLMs. So welcome to the final panel of the LLM Symposium edition 2025. It will be about understanding the H-1B visa, its challenges, strategies, and the future of skilled immigration. My name is Victoria Cota. Like I said, I'm the LLM representative this year, but I'm also an LLM student, and I will be co-moderating this panel with Maria Leanne, who's also another LLM student this year. I guess, can I, all right, sorry. I'll start introducing the panelists. So we have Professor Dan Camstrong, who's representing Boston College Law School's faculty. He teaches 1L classes, Introduction to Human Rights, International Immigration Law, International Human Rights Law, Constitutional Law, Administrative Law, many other types of law. He's also responsible for founding the Immigration and Asylum Clinic, and he co-founded BC's Law School Immigration Spring Break Service Trips. Then we have our second panelist, Attorney Molly Kenny, who is an immigration attorney and partner at Fragomel Del Rey at the office here in Boston. And finally, we have Caroline Tang, who's also an immigration attorney and at the Austin office of Ogletree Deakins. Sorry if I butchered the name.
Oh, that was correct.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And she also speaks on immigration topics at industry seminars, professional conferences, and she advises and counsels corporate entities to deliver comprehensive and effective immigration programs that reflect their culture and priorities. As you can see, we have a highly experienced panelist that will approach this topic from different perspectives and will only enrich our discussion. And before I begin, I'd like to remind that this is an overview of the H-1B visas and that the panelists will not provide any legal service. So without further ado, let's start with our first theme, which is the background and context of the H-1B visa. And what is an H-1B visa after all? What is its impact on the US economy? We'll answer, Professor Camstrong will answer this question. So I'll leave it to you, Professor.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the other two panelists. It's really great to be on a program with experts who are actually practicing, because I did practice immigration law for many years, but I'm not as engaged in practice, although these days I seem to be fighting the battle of the 14th Amendment all over again, and habeas corpus and things like that. So let me just give a brief introduction so we can leave the most amount of time for more technical questions. But I'm assuming that people are not immigration experts yet. So I should say at the very beginning, it's important to understand that US immigration law, unlike immigration law in many other countries, but like immigration law in some other countries, is very categorical. So there are categories like citizen and non-citizen. There are categories like immigrant and non-immigrant, meaning to differentiate people who want to live permanently in this country from people who might want to be here for a shorter period of time, although that could be years in many cases. And within those two categories, there are categories. So there are family categories to get a so-called permanent resident status or a green card. There are business categories. There's a lottery. There's refugee and asylum possibilities, at least for the moment, although those are being restricted quite a lot right now. And then within the non-immigrant category, it's really categorical. So if you want to come to this country as a non-immigrant, you basically have to fit within one particular category, and these categories are denominated by letters. So if you want to be a student, it would be a so-called F visa. The H-1B visa, which actually goes back to the codification of immigration law in 1952, but has been revised quite a bit over the years, is quite interesting and in some ways almost unique, although not completely unique, because it straddles the categories of the immigrant visa and the non-immigrant visa. Also, when people think about what immigration law is supposed to be about, there are various theories about that. Some people say it should be about helping the economy or about merit. Others say families. Others say refuge for people facing harm. The H-1B is really a critical visa because it brings to the United States some of the very best and brightest people in the world, many of whom then get to stay here with green cards and get citizenship, often along with their families. So technically speaking, the H-1B is a temporary so-called non-immigrant visa, and it allows an employer to petition for a highly educated foreign professional to work in something that's called a specialty occupation. And this phrase, specialty occupation, is defined in the statute and by regulations and by case law over the years. And without getting into too many of the details of it, essentially, it is something that requires a bachelor's degree at least, or the equivalent. So you can see it's available for jobs in fields ranging from mathematics, engineering, technology, computer science, medical sciences, all sorts of, AI stuff now, and law. It's available for an initial duration of 3 years, which is quite a bit longer than, for example, a so-called tourist visa or a business visa in most cases. And it can be extended up to 6 years, and in some cases, even longer than that. Basically, a person can apply for a visa, for an H-1B visa, either from abroad or possibly from the United States if they're in another non-immigrant visa category, such as student. And therefore, this explains why it's quite popular and important for, in particular, LLM students or other highly educated people who come to this country with advanced degrees, because it gives you some possibilities of transitioning and getting a good job. But you have to have the necessary qualifications. There's a whole sub-cottage industry of evaluating degrees from other countries are the equivalent to a bachelor's degree. You can also sometimes aggregate experience, although the Trump administration the first time around cut back on that quite a lot, and I expect we're going to see more restrictive approaches to that. But basically, you have to have the necessary academic qualifications. You also have to find a job, and you have to find an employer who is willing to hire you into that job. So it's very personal in that way, and that can be tricky, although many people manage to do it. And programs like ours can help by helping people network or meet other people. The job does have to qualify as what I said, a specialty occupation. Again, it's sort of inside out because the specialty occupation is defined as a job that requires the credentials that the person is required to have in order to get the job. So there has to be a fit. And again, the Trump administration the first time around was quite strict about this. This has varied among different administrations. There's some flexibility in how these things get interpreted. But as a basic proposition, a person who has a bachelor's degree in French poetry would have a very hard time getting an H-1B visa as a physicist, for example. And in addition to all of that, the person applying for the visa has to be eligible in general under US immigration laws, which also has a whole other set of what I call in my class hurdles. That is to say, prior immigration history, if there's ever been any kind of fraud or overstaying of visas, that can be an issue. If the person has, of course, any criminal record, that's going to be an issue. So I think it is almost always a good idea in these cases to have a lawyer. And there are interesting ethical issues about whether an employer's lawyer should do this unilaterally. I know many firms do this. I have some issues with it, but I think reasonable minds can differ about that. I personally usually recommend non-citizens to at least do a consultation with their own lawyer, because there may be things in your personal history that might not be appropriate for the employer's lawyer to know, and you might need advice about some of those things. However, these are not easy to get. There are substantial fees for applying, and they can be quite complicated. I was just going to do a general thing, so let me just say one more thing and then I'll stop. One of the most attractive features of the H-1B visa is that it allows for what's called dual intent. And this is not true of many other non-immigrant visas. So technically, if you are here as a student, you had to make a representation to the US government that you had a home in another country that you had no intention of abandoning. That is, that you were not coming here as an immigrant. If you come in the H-1B visa category, the rules are much looser about that, and it makes it much easier to get permission to stay for a longer period of time and then to what is called adjust status to lawful permanent resident status, i.e. a green card, if you can then get a permanent job offer, because there are categories for that as well, and the H-1B can be a good transition. So that's my quick, dirty, and spectacular introduction, and I'll stop there. Maria, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much for your participation here. Now we want to focus more into the general mechanics of the visa. The first question would be for Attorney Tang. What is the process to get an H-1B visa? How many visas are issued each year? And some data shows that it's very limited. It's a very limited cap. Is like the salaries for the potential job affect these requisites somehow, or if the potential employers, as Professor Kanstrom mentioned, could have more offers or potential employers filling in the visa petition for you, help your perspective to get a visa?
Yeah, so let's start with the number of new H-1B visas available every year. So for a private sector employer, they would be subject to what we call the H-1B cap or quota. And so there is a quota on the number of new H-1Bs that can be given out every year. So that number is 65,000, just like, for what we call the regular quota, plus an additional 20,000 that we refer to as a U.S. master's degree quota. And those 20,000 are reserved for individuals who graduated from a U.S. university with a master's degree or higher. So in total, it's 85,000. If you're graduating with an LLM from BC, I'm sorry, I went to BU, so don't kill me. But if you're graduating from BC with an LLM, then you are probably subject to that U.S. master's degree quota. So that would be 85,000 total that you would be considered. So those are the number of new H-1Bs every year. There are some companies or organizations that are not subject to the quota. So for instance, if you decided to work for, BC after law school, if they wanted to sponsor you for an H-1B visa, they're not actually subject to the H-1B quota because of the type of institution. So there are certain institutions, typically they're going to be, certain nonprofits and universities, etc. So there are certain organizations that are not subject to the quota. But most private sector employers, like if you're looking for a law firm, a law firm is probably going to be subject to that H-1B quota. So that number is 85,000 a year, including the master's quota. Because there's a lot more demand for that number than there are available H-1B numbers available every year, that means the government utilizes a lottery system for everyone who wants an H-1B that year. So essentially, Molly and I are probably, pretty busy right now. We're gearing up for what we call our H-1B caps, which means that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they're about to open up this lottery process in March. So every year they tell us, like, hey, the lottery is going to run these particular days in March. And basically every employer who wants to sponsor a foreign national for a new H-1B this year, you need to submit their information into this website. And after we have all of this information, we're going to run a lottery of all the people whose names were submitted in that website. And so Molly and I are busy getting ready for that right now. It's sort of like our, sort of like for accountants, it's like tax, right? So this is one of the busiest times of the year for me and Molly. So the employer will, if the employer essentially wants to sponsor you, usually it's because they've extended you an offer, then they will reach out to their law firm and then we'll get you submitted into this online lottery process. I don't know if you all want to guess how many, like, on average, requests the government receives every year of these H-1B numbers. So I said there were 85,000 available. I don't know if anyone wants to guess how many, like, across the United States.
800,000, maybe.
800,000? That's like, I think that's not a bad guess. It's higher than, or that's higher than what the actual number is. But generally, I tell people, hey, it's probably going to be around like 400 to 500,000, just sort of based on like prior years demand. So when you think about that, like, you know, when you just do the math on that, the selection rate is, you know, it's low, right? You're not guaranteed to get an H-1B number in the lottery. You also asked the question of, like, hey, what happens if multiple employers submit me into the lottery, and also does the offered compensation impact? Right now, as it stands, the compensation level does not impact your chances of selection in the lottery. The one thing that impacts your chances of selection in the lottery is if you have that U.S. master's degree or higher, because that allows you to be considered for that 20,000 number and not just the 65,000 number. And it doesn't matter which U.S. University, you know, it's sort of like the graduate degree from BC is as good as from Harvard, as good as from BU, as good as from Northeastern, you know, like all of those, you know, they're all U.S. universities, so that's all considered. So compensation right now does not matter. There's been some discussion and, you know, proposals, you know, that I think that's something that, you know, I would say Trump administration 1.0 also talked about, was saying like, hey, we want to prioritize visas for quote unquote our best and brightest, and we're going to find that by, you know, how much money they're making. But in effect, you know, right now as it stands, there's not like a prioritization or preference for someone who makes more versus another person, just strictly in terms of them being selected. You know, that's pretty much all. And then your other question relating to, can multiple employers sponsor you for an H-1B visa? In the past, what we saw was sometimes a person would have multiple offers from different companies, and they would all submit that person into the lottery. And in the past, it used to be that sort of pumped up your odds of winning the lottery, because it was sort of like each submission was considered individually. There was one particular year in which Department of Homeland Security did sort of a fraud investigation and found that there were some companies that were purporting to be different companies, but were actually related to each other, and they were colluding to submit like really what was one person who was going to work for one company. They were colluding to submit like their folks multiple times into the lottery to increase their chances of selection. So there was a fraud investigation on that. I think a lot of companies were investigated, and those H-1Bs were rescinded or whatever they did post investigation. And then since then, now they've actually changed that system so that they're saying, hey, it's going to be beneficiaries, which means, I, as a person with an offer, I could get an offer from multiple companies, right? And I could say like, hey, this offer is contingent on, like I'll accept an offer from this company and this other company because I've just graduated and I'm not going to start until the end of the summer or whatever. And then they both submit me into the lottery, and then maybe I make my decision as to, which one I'm going to join. So that could still theoretically happen, but the idea is that now they're going to identify me based on my name and my passport number. And even if multiple companies submit me into the lottery, I only get one shot as opposed to multiple shots at the lottery.
Thank you so much. That sounds very hard to get elected through that selection process. But let's see. There's another question that if there's any exceptions to a lottery, and if Attorney Kinney wants to jump in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I think Carolyn definitely summarized very well some of the hurdles. I think Professor Kamstrom used that word earlier in terms of immigration law in the US, and certainly we see them, including this H-1B lottery. So Carolyn mentioned some of the exceptions. There are exceptions. So we call these CAP exempt organizations. There's kind of two categories primarily that these exceptions to the CAP lottery might fall into. One is these CAP exempt organizations. And as was mentioned, that does mean organizations that traditionally are, let's say, institutions of higher education, educational institutions generally, hospitals, nonprofits. There are some new rules actually in effect that can kind of expand what that could look like. So it could be that you are sponsored by what traditionally would be an organization that is subject to these annual limitations, but you're being placed at a nonprofit perhaps. And so in that instance, you may be able to be considered cap exempt. As was mentioned, working for Boston College, that often would be cap exempt, certainly. But working for a law firm is not something that would be considered cap exempt. So there are a number of organizations that may qualify, but what I would say with that again is it's if you're thinking broadly, it's the traditional kind of nonprofits, NGOs, perhaps, again, hospitals, educational institutions, those types of organizations. I would say as well, there are most certainly more aggressive stances on how you could approach maybe leveraging a cap exempt institution. I don't know, Carolyn, if you would agree with me. I am, we're all lawyers here, are certainly interested in compliance. So I tend to see, definitely don't look for those workarounds. They really ultimately are, I think, quite questionable. Rather, I think the conversation could be, are there other visa categories, which of course we're not going to get into on this panel, but are there other visa categories that I may or may not be eligible for? So that's one category, these cap exempt organizations, meaning your sponsoring petitioner, your employer, doesn't need to be subject to this annual limitation. The other, which is a big one, although there's a big caveat, is that at some point you have to have been subject to the cap if you are working for a cap subject organization. But once you get into that lottery, once you get in under that cap, then you're not subject to it again for a new employer. So let's say, again, you go to work for a law firm and it's law firm A, and you, a couple years later, whatever the time frame might be, they've sponsored you, you've been subjected to the cap, you've been selected in the random lottery, you're on an H-1B visa, and then you decide, I'd really like to move to another organization or go in-house or whatever it might look like. And in those instances, you can change employers once you've been subject to that annual limitation. You can change employers to a new employer without having to be subject to it again. So you're still looking at the lottery at the outset, but once you get kind of across that threshold, you do have a lot more mobility and are not going to be looking at it every time you're looking for a new employer.
That sounds really great, because going through the process again, it could be very hard to get. Thank you so much. And again, this is not a legal advice. This is just a panel. And another question, after you get the H-1B visa, what happens when it expires, or after the postponing of 3 years? And I think Professor Kanstrom mentioned that it has this dual intent, the green card citizenship.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot packed in there, right? And I love, Professor Kanstrom, how you presented this dual intent idea, which is really this non-immigrant intent, this dual intent idea, and the idea of a non-immigrant versus immigrant category are all integral to what the U.S. immigration system looks like, and certainly in the employment-based context. So I think I feel a little biased because I think I'm about to share some silver linings with the H-1B process and some areas where it actually is a bit reasonable and has some positive pieces after we've just discussed sort of some of the negative. This lottery seems so overwhelming, but once you do get through the lottery, I think it was mentioned earlier, you do have traditionally up to 6 years in H-1B status. It's initially granted in a 3-year approval, and then you can extend for another 3 years. But of course, what does that mean? If you want to stay here longer, if you're interested in perhaps becoming a permanent resident, or what we commonly refer to as a green card holder, or even beyond that, becoming a U.S. citizen. And so what is very common if you are sponsored for the H-1B is that your employer might talk to you, or you should certainly approach the employer about, what does that look like? What does that look like if I'm interested in staying here longer? I know there's a limit here. And the reality is that the U.S. government kind of recognizes that. So somewhere along the line, right, they said, you know what, 6 years might not be enough. We might need to actually go beyond that, because if you want to stay and you're looking for a green card, sometimes it can take a lot longer than that. And frankly, for certain individuals, that's a whole other panel, which you might have already had today, but it could, and it's definitely going to take longer than 6 years. So the government has said that, all right, you get those 6 years, but we're going to allow that you actually do have an opportunity to extend beyond that 6 year, provided you've reached certain milestones in the green card process. So if we stop there and then kind of zoom out high level, we go back to that non-immigrant intent and that dual intent, which is to say that, as Professor Kanstrom said, while the H-1B is absolutely, I should say, considered a non-immigrant visa, meaning you're coming here for a temporary period. Sure, that might be 3 years. You might extend it for another 3 years, but it's temporary. Generally, if it's a temporary visa, the government wants to see that you're going to head home, that you have these ties to your own country, that you're returning home. And as was mentioned, in the H-1B context, they say, we don't really care. You can decide to stay here for the 3 years, the 2 years, whatever, 1 month, or you can decide that you get here, you like it, and you want to pursue permanent residency. And so what that means is it does allow you that flexibility. So it's really, again, some categories will not. So some of these other types of employment-based visas won't allow that it's so easy to kind of look at the options and pursue different options. Say, I want to stay here permanently. The H-1B does allow that. And it also does allow that if you are reaching that 6 year max, provided that you have, again, reached certain milestones in the green card process, you can actually extend it indefinitely as you're pursuing that green card. So you may know people, you may not know this, but you may know people who have actually been here on an H for 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years, perhaps in some cases, if not further. We hope not. We hope the green card process doesn't take that long, but everyone's case is different, right? So the milestones in the green card process have to do with specific steps. The green card process is traditionally 3 stages. Sometimes it's only 2, but you have to reach these certain milestones. And again, that would be something I would encourage certainly to raise to your employer, to talk to them about what their green card policy is, what their sponsorship policy is, if for no other reason than to inform yourself and to kind of educate yourself if that is something that you're interested in pursuing.
Thank you so much for this big overview about all the process and the milestones that are important to comply with, if you want to say. We're gonna move on to the legal practice for students, because I think majority of us, like the viewers and interested parties, are students. So for Attorney Tang, can you practice law with this type of visa in the US? And which are the requisites to keep that status? Like, for example, the days abroad that you can travel, obviously sit for the bar, the OPT, how to transition, all this. Thank you.
Yeah, so you can definitely practice law in the United States with an H-1B visa. Typically, the timing would look like this. So, right now, let's say you're graduating in spring this year. And so one thing is, if you have an offer from a law firm this year, you're going to graduate in the spring, they can go ahead and put you into the H-1B lottery this year, even though you have not graduated yet, with the expectation that you will be completing your degree by the time we would have to file this additional step. So what happens is the lottery takes place in March. And then at the end of March, we find out, hey, all of these folks were selected in the lottery. We notify the employers and we notify the employees to say, hey, you were selected in the lottery. Now we have to file this additional paperwork with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services no later than June 30th this year. By that time, you need to show me that you have your LLM or your JD at that point. So right now, as we're going through the process, we're reminding these employees, like, hey, if you know of any fees, unpaid fees, or some things that might hold up your graduation, now is the time to tell us, because we don't want you to be selected in the lottery and then you say, hey, I actually can't provide to you my diploma or transcript showing that I graduated because I never took this one class, or I never paid this library fee, and now they're refusing to let me graduate, right? So you want to make sure that there's not going to be something stopping you from being able to graduate this spring. So in this timeline, we can do that, right? Like, if you're lucky enough to be selected, then you've got to give us your, show us your degree by the time we file this paperwork. CIS. And then theoretically, you'd sit for the bar in July, and then you'd onboard your H-1B. If you were selected this year, your H-1B would probably go into effect October 1 of this year. And then your employer would probably be preparing your H-1B paperwork saying like, hey, this is for an associate attorney subject to passing the bar. The requirement, Professor Canstrom talked about earlier, the requirement for the specialty occupation is that the occupation itself must require at least a bachelor's degree in a specific form of study, right? And so first-year associate attorney who has not yet entered or has not yet been admitted into the bar, that's still an H-1B occupation because you need either the JD or some other law degree, right, to be able to qualify for that role. So that's a clear H-1B occupation, even if you haven't yet been admitted to the bar. Now, of course, in order to practice as a lawyer in state or commonwealth, you need to have been admitted to the bar. So that's going to be a separate issue of, hopefully you will have passed the bar by the time your H-1B comes up for renewal. I would hope so. But in order to get your first H-1B, it's not a barrier to that you have not yet been admitted. Now, let's say you're not selected in the lottery this year, then what will happen is, well, either way, selected or not selected, your work authorization this summer would start after graduation, and that is going to be your OPT or optional practical training. So you apply for that OPT before graduation, and the idea is, after graduation, you get this OPT work authorization in the form of an EAD card, employment authorization document. It's a little card that looks like, sort of looks like a driver's license, right? It's got your picture on it and it has validity dates on it. So you get 1 year of OPT having graduated with a law degree. Now, if you graduated with a STEM degree, there are certain STEM designated degrees, science, technology, engineering, and math. If you had like a science degree, then you would actually be eligible for an additional 2 years of OPT for a total of 3 years of OPT. Unfortunately, us liberal arts majors who majored in, who then went to law school, we're not eligible for that additional STEM period, right? So we get that 1 year of OPT. So your OPT is going to run from after graduation to the summer, to next summer. So let's say you have that OPT, you didn't win the lottery this year. Well, if you still have this offer, this employer still wants to move forward with you, they can submit you into the lottery next year. So March of 2026 will be another lottery. So assuming all else is the same, that employer will probably say, okay, well, we'll submit you into the lottery in March of 2026. Let's see if you're selected in that lottery. If you're selected in March 2026, then we'll file your paperwork, following that. And then your H-1B would go into effect October 1 of 2026. If you're wondering, hey, what do I do for my work authorization between summer 26 and October 1, 2026? There is a provision that we call cap gap, which says, hey, as long as this H-1B paperwork, the I-129 petition has been filed with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services before your OPT expires, then you're eligible for this additional sort of work authorization to cover the gap until October 1 of 2026. Or maybe it's actually, now it's like April 1 of 2027, theoretically. I think they pushed out the cap gap. But anyway, so yeah, so you would have work authorization to cover your cap gap until your H-1B goes into. Yes, Professor Canstrom, you had a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say something general about this because I think what you're saying is so excellently specific and helpful, but almost none of this is actually in the statute. And I think we're living in a moment of unprecedented transition and change. And I just want people to be really careful because things that we have taken for granted for the last decade could be changed quickly, or at least tried to be changed quickly. In the last Trump administration, they tried to change many things too quickly, and the court said you have to comply with the Administrative Procedure Act or various things. But I would just urge people to be careful about this because I'm quite worried, and I know immigration lawyers who do more, representing of people with temporary protected status or in parole status or asylum are really in a sort of panic mode right now because everything seems to be kind of up for grabs. So at the moment, this is all absolutely true and excellent and accurate, but do stay on top of it because it could change really fast. Sorry to have to say that.
No, that's a really good point because actually in immigration, very little of what we do is codified, right, in statute. Like there's the statute and then basically almost everything Molly and I do on a daily basis is either regulations or are just like, immigrant like policy manuals and handbooks and practice, because, oftentimes I've been asked by clients, where in the law does it say this thing? And I'll have to say, the Immigration and Nationality Act says this. But what we are talking about here is something that is just literally in a handbook that USCIS goes by that can be changed at any moment, or some form instructions that could be changed at any moment. And like you said, we've been practicing, Molly and I have been practicing a long time. So we've been practicing sort of based on rote, like just out of habit now at this point, right? Because historically immigration has actually, employment-based immigration, up until I would say the first Trump administration, was actually quite stable in terms of just how you would expect adjudications to pan out. And then yeah, so the first Trump administration sort of threw a wrench into things, and then now certainly I think they're looking more closely at whatever they can undo via executive order, which is a lot of things actually, because a lot of things weren't codified, and then even the things that were sort of passed, pushed through last minute regs before the Biden administration officially exited. I think they're looking at those things too, to be like, okay, what can we unwind through additional regs this time around?
Although I do think Elon Musk has historically been a fan of the H-1B program.
He is, like, I'm not going to get too opinionated on this, but like, I am thinking to myself, well, Elon needs those H's for Tesla. So I kind of think that's why there haven't been as many problems as as we could have seen by now.
Thank you so much. Now, like if we don't get this H-1B visa as you suggested as another possible option, what are the other similar options that we can take a look at?
Yeah, so a lot of your options, frankly, are going to be, so the first ones that we always go to are like, what is your citizenship? Because if you're a citizen of certain countries, you have more options than other folks. And those citizenships would be Canada and Mexico right now are beneficiaries of the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, which used to be called NAFTA. And there is a TN visa pursuant to USMCA or NAFTA that actually has a specific list of occupations where you can get this visa that is not subject to quotas and actually doesn't even have wage requirements. So lawyer is fortunately on the list. So if you're Canadian or Mexican, congratulations on that. There's also visas that are, sort of like the H-1B, but for specific citizenships. So one is the H-1B1, which is for Chileans or Singaporeans. And so those are also based on treaties that we have in place. And then also the E3 visa for Australians. Those are what we call like H-1Bs for those specific countries. And there's, no quota issue, knock on wood, that we've seen with those because there hasn't really just been enough demand. But if you're Australian, Chilean, or Singaporean, we would look into those options for you. Also, if you're a citizen of a certain country and you go and work for a company that is majority owned by that same citizenship, and there's a treaty in place covering the US and that country. So it's a little convoluted for me to explain this, but let's say like you're a British citizen and you go work for a company that is majority British owned, that company could potentially apply for what we call an E1 or an E2 visa that's based on that company having some sort of investor or trade relationship with the United States. It's not applicable to all countries. So you have to go look at the list of countries that have treaty relationships in place with the United States. And of course, that would be dependent on that treaty relationship. But that can work if if I'm a citizen of the UK and I go work for a company that's majority UK owned, they might be able to do that for me. Let's see, other options. More realistically, let's say you're not from any of these countries. There's the option to go work for, an organization that is not subject to the H-1B quota, right? So, considering a university, if there was some way for you to get a job with a U.S. university, if they were willing to sponsor you for a quota exempt H-1B, then that would be one way to keep you in the United States. Doesn't really jive necessarily with if you've received an offer from a law firm, right? Because you'd be going to work for that US university. I mean, one option there is if you are working for a quota exempt company or a quota exempt employer like the US university, if you're doing that part-time, you could theoretically take up private sector employment part-time as well through what we call a concurrent H-1B with that private sector employer. And that concurrent H-1B would not be subject to the H-1B quota as long as you're maintaining your employment with the US university. But first of all, realistically, if you're looking at law firm jobs, I don't know that a law firm is going to be super happy about you saying, hey, I'm going to go work for this university, 20 hours a week, right? Like they're hiring you so that you can be a full-time associate working for them. And then second of all, your employment authorization with that law firm would be contingent on you maintaining this employment with the university, and the university, may be subject to funding restrictions in terms of whether they can keep your job going, right? So it's not, I could see that working in some circumstances, but I wouldn't say that most employers would be interested in engaging in that. One thing that has sort of cropped up recently is there are universities now that offer what we call day one curricular practical training, or day one CPT, where essentially students will say, hey, I'm going back to enroll in this university, and this means I'm going to have to go to school full time, but this particular university will give me, like, on the first day of attendance, curricular practical training, or CPT, to work full time for my employer. Now, the issue here is, first of all, you'd have to go re-enroll in this other school. You have to pay tuition again. You have to go to school full time, and then you have to be studying a field that would relate to whatever you're doing, whatever you're working on. And so if if your area here is law, I don't know that there is a day one CPT program out there that would relate to the practice of law, or if this is really a route, that's not really a route that I think most people want to go, towards. And the other caveat with that too is, there have been some of those schools cropped up, and some of them turned out to sort of have fraudulent, classes going on, i.e. like they weren't really hiring professors and students weren't really attending classes. And so that's very much a, do your due diligence, caveat emptor. Like if it sounds too good to be true, it is probably too good to be true. So whatever, I think in general for foreign nationals, as you're considering your options, if something sounds too good to be true, like, maybe take Professor Canstrom's advice and say, like, go get a consult on that. Like, if some employer is offering you something that sounds too good to be true, or some university is offering you something that sounds too good to be true, like, you think about whether that's legitimate or not.
I would add one more possibility that occurs to me. If you have a student like Maria, who's actually a genius, you could possibly get an O visa.
Yeah, the O1 visa is, it's what we call, actually, if I ever had a band, I'd call it Aliens of Extraordinary Ability, because it's the visa for aliens of extraordinary ability. And so that is a visa that does not have a quota restriction. It's a high bar, right? Like, you got to show you're nationally or internationally renowned in whatever your area of expertise is. You've got to get all sorts of recommendation letters from, other people in the industry where they talk about how amazing you are and how everyone knows who you are and the work that you've done. And it ends up being like, an O1 filing is about like this thick, full of, exhibits. But that's a good visa for people who, who have like a lot of credentials that they can cite to. Yeah.
Those are really good options that I think they are all really worth to take a look at. Obviously, the O visa might be suitable for some of our interested attendants. And from let's change a little bit to the employer's perspective, because we're talking about how to apply, but from the people hiring, like what this sponsorship would cost and what it's the purpose, because actually you're hiring, like you're investing, it's not long term, it's like 6 years, and sometimes, as Professor Canstrom said, it can be extended, or if you comply with the green card requisites, it can be more like longer, but not all the times are that way. So yeah, the pros and cons, and these would be very high, like viable for us, because we need to incentivize the people interviewing us to hire.
Yeah, definitely. So before I say that, can I just mention this is so topical. I went to Boston College undergraduate, and I will often use when talking to new companies, new employers, new individuals who aren't used to the immigration space in the US, I will often use the example of my Boston College. I loved it so much, but my history degree would have been really tricky for me to get an H-1B visa for what I actually did immediately after college, which wasn't related at all and wasn't related to law either. So, but it is a pleasure. I know I was a last minute addition. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you all. With that being said, I think for the employer, so there's a couple things here. It's really going to depend on your employer. And by that, I mean just high level for you all, knowing that as you're going out into the job market and looking for employment, some of the companies that are going to be recruiting you and looking to hire you have tons of experience with hiring individuals who may not have U.S. work authorization in the immediate or may need sponsorship at some period. And in those instances, they get it. They've seen kind of what the process looks like. They understand there is an investment, of course, monetary, time, but as well, that showing an investment in an employee is actually a wonderful thing for a company, right? There's a lot of payback with that too. You know, we want to be invested in as an employee. We want to see that our company is actually cares about us and is invested in having us for, yes, okay, we'll talk about that. It might be finite in a minute, but that they're interested in showing that they're dedicated to, you know, it's binary. It's also binary, I think, in the sense that employers benefit from other employers making these investments, and they know that. And so, yeah, okay, I might say I'm going to sponsor Molly, and it's a risk. She may stay, she may go, or we might not have an avenue at the end of 6 years. But I also know that I am going to, during that time, probably there's going to be other individuals who come by and are great candidates and we're really excited about. And some other company has already gotten them through the lottery. So that's really, you know, that's an investment that I'm benefiting from, or some other company, they have a green card because some other companies invested in that. So I do think many companies recognize that, understand that, and are baking in those costs. But of course, there's the other end of the spectrum. And, you know, depending on what you're looking at, it could be a company that just has zero experience with hiring somebody who doesn't have, you know, immediate work authorization and or does need that sponsorship at some point. And in those instances, again, I think, you know, the cost, it's not cheap. It's going to depend, again, on sort of the unique pieces of the case. But I think a safe estimate is probably about, a company can plan to spend about 10 grand, and that's including the government filing fees, which are steep, frankly, in the H-1B context. They're about 5,000 or so, depending on a couple moving pieces. With that being said, in the scheme of a business, to get an employee who, and this is, you know, where I think, I'm sure you're all brilliant. I'm sure you are all incredible hires. So, you know, really kind of advocating for yourself in this sense. 10 grand in the scheme of a business life cycle, really to get a talent that is going to add so much value into the company is well worth it. You know, that is an investment that companies are happy to make. And if the company is making some, you know, I think pretty savvy or smart financial decisions, that's going to be the calculation. And it's not such a huge amount at all that it should deter, again, a really good hire. You take that chance, you take that risk. And again, ultimately, I would say what you can bring to the table as well is it doesn't have to be temporary. So you don't need to look at this as something that inevitably has an end date. You know, in fact, I'd say for most people, and Carolyn, I think you know, I'm sure it's been the exact same in your practice. It is recommended not only by our teams, but it is common practice. And again, companies who have a larger immigration program are, you know, onboarding their new hires and then kind of starting the green card process really pretty quickly thereafter. And again, that can change depending on the company or depending on the economic climate, but certainly they're looking ahead. They're thinking, we don't want this to be temporary. We want this to be something that gives us both options. So let's pursue that. And in this instance, you all can bring that to the table if indeed it is a company that perhaps doesn't have as much experience in the immigration space. I'd say certainly in my experience, and Carolyn, I'm not sure if you would echo this, but when working with companies who don't have kind of a as established of an immigration program, and that it's newer to them, they haven't sponsored as many individuals. They're so grateful when that employee, you know, the company needs to push it, the company needs to sponsor, the company needs to pay, all these things. There's all sorts of requirements around that, but they're grateful if the employee can say, this is what I understood, this is what I learned, you know, this is how we can approach this.
I agree. If it's a larger organization, they sort of have more infrastructure in place and they already have like these technical subject matter experts, and they'll probably be able to say our standard process is to, start your green card process after 6 months or after a year, right? But a smaller company for sure is going to appreciate if you say, hey, just so you're aware, I'm going to need permanent resident sponsorship at some point. Could you please, help me, do you guys have counsel for this? I mean, presumably they would, right? If they had sponsored your H-1B visa, they would have had legal counsel, but they won't mind at all if you raise it to them and say, hey, just so you know, we're going to need this down the line, and this process can take a couple of years. So we want you to, I want you to know maybe we need to budget for this and be prepared for this down the line.
Also, if anybody ever needs help in this situation, there have been studies for generations by demographers, sociologists, anthropologists, and economists that show that immigrants almost always outperform US citizens on almost any metric in jobs. And employers know that. And so that, that's why this is such a popular program.
Isn't it a line in Hamilton? I'm showing my like true dorkiness here, but it is a line in Hamilton where they're like basically like, immigrants get the job done. So, but yeah, I think the other thing too, and this goes, Carolyn, you were mentioning this, and to your advice, Professor Kamstrom, is the payment again. It could be that, so we've thrown out a number that's just an approximation. It could be that they're asking you to cover some of the costs. That is not the norm for most of the employers I work with. It does happen at points, but it is not the norm. If it does happen, it can be allowed, but I would just caution again, if they're pushing, you can't cover all the costs. That's a hard stop, no. And then within that, there's some nuances. But I would just say that like for your expectation setting, that traditionally is not what companies do. My advice to companies is generally do not do that. There are some spaces where it technically is allowed, but even then I say, this is for your benefit too. Yeah, go ahead.
And I would say, if a company is saying that, usually it's because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Not that they're trying to take advantage of you, but just more that they don't know any better. So if they say like for an H-1B, which is going to be the most common first step, I also do the same. I mean, technically there could be, but then you got to get into the whole prevailing wage issue. It's a whole thing. So instead, I just tell employers hey, for your best compliance, you just pay for the whole cost of the H-1B. And usually, if you tell an employer that, they understand oh, okay, yeah, that's understood. And then later on in the green card process, there are parts of the green card process that the employee can cover. And so that could be something where further on down the line we talk about that, because ultimately the green card process is going to be a lot more. So maybe they might expect the employee to cover some component of it, and there are certain components that the employee can cover. But for the H-1B, yeah.
And if they don't have counsel, have them reach out to Carolyn or myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all these, not legal counsel, but your expertise and sharing your point of view and just recommendations that are very useful, because otherwise it's too much information, too much websites to look at, and sometimes there's people approaching you that it's not even with the right information, so just wasting time. So this panel is just perfect, and I feel like you helped a lot. And now I think Victoria is going to introduce the last part of this panel.
Yes, thank you so much. Like Maria said, this has been really informative and helpful. And I'd like to close off this panel by talking a little bit of the actuality. And like Professor Kamstrom already mentioned, a lot of things are looking to change or are looking uncertain for now. So if we can have a little bit, some minutes talking about the recent debates, and then we'll have a couple of minutes, I believe, for questions and answers. Professor Kamstrom, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I have to say, I have to leave sharp at 2, unfortunately, because I have to go teach a class. So I'll be a little briefer than I was thinking initially. But basically, there's been conflicting studies and major debates about immigration in general and about the H-1B program in particular for decades now. It's always been both highly sought after and praised, and then also criticized. My personal opinion is that the H-1B program is good for the US economy and for US global leadership and for immigrants and for their families. The American Immigration Council ticks off some very good reasons that I think are right, that immigrant workers and native-born workers often have different skill sets which complement each other in the labor market rather than conflicting. People are not competing for exactly the same jobs in many circumstances. Immigrant workers, for a second point, tend to come and stay in the US and invest their wages in the economy. Businesses expand as a result of programs like the H-1B program. Actually, many countries around the world are developing programs like this, merit-based programs and economic support programs, some of which are modeled on the H-1B program. Immigrants create new businesses, new ideas and innovations developed by immigrants, fuel economic growth. I mean, again, you could cite Elon Musk as a complicated example of this phenomenon, but there are people who come to this country and then, succeed. Others also do criticize it and question whether the effect on the economy is net positive or net negative, because it may impede training of US citizens for, in particular, STEM jobs. There's been a lot of debate about that. But it's basically, this is an old debate, and it's very much in flux right now. I would just say that, as was mentioned before, the Biden administration worked long and hard to develop new regs, and the regs are quite specific, and I thought generally pretty good in clearing up some of the confusion in the program. But right now, all of that is going to be up for grabs. So you got to just stay tuned and watch the news, and keep in touch with a good lawyer, which we have too. And I just wanted to thank you both again for doing this. It was really excellent. It's hard to know. I would expect that we're going to see extreme vetting coming back in. I would expect that we're going to see greater scrutiny, which may result in higher costs. But I do think at the end of the day, this program will continue. I think the consensus is pretty strongly in favor of having this or something like this. And all the recent proposals for the Congress to revise immigration law have contained programs either just like this or very similar to this. So I would think it'll probably continue.
I believe we won't have any questions. So if Attorney Tang or Kenny want to add something in.
I don't have anything in particular to add other than that, you guys did a very nice job, had some very good questions and sort of to structure the conversation. And as Molly said, we're certainly available to answer questions. If you all end up getting offers with employers who need assistance, Molly and I both represent employers, and so certainly feel free to reach out to one or both of us on that, and certainly, be around to help.
Talented, honest lawyers are hard to find, so take them up on this.
Great. Yeah, echoing what's been said, really a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Victoria, Maria, for all the coordination, setting this up, and the invitation. And yeah, let us know. We're wishing you all a ton of luck. Certainly, you probably don't need it. I'm sure it's a wonderful group, but holler if we can be of any help.
Thank you so much. And thank you for watching and for participating. And thank Anne and Sergio for helping us with this as well.
Thanks, Anne. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you all for participating today. It's very nice to have you all.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.